Chapter 1001. In the central square of Guangling City. Old man, what if I don't let go? Yu Haoran asked coldly. He had knocked Xiao Ruojia unconscious with a heavy punch, and then used the secret technique of overdrawing his witch ancestor bloodline. If you don't let go, you can go to hell. The old man in black took out the 9-star soul chasing sword and was ready to attack. You can give it a try. Just as Yu Haoran was about to kill Xiao Ruojia and use the secret technique of overdrawing his witch ancestor bloodline to heavily injure the old man in black, he heard a familiar voice. Then, a thin old man in blue appeared in front of him. Who are you? The old man in black asked solemnly as he subconsciously took a step back and held the lower honorable realm sword tightly in his hand. Although the thin old man in blue who had suddenly appeared in front of him was only a second tribulation quasi-martial honorable, he gave him a very dangerous feeling. Even with the lower honorable realm sword, the 9-star soul chasing sword, the dangerous feeling did not weaken at all. My surname is Shun, and my name is Hao Kong. I'm just a nobody. The old man in blue introduced himself indifferently. After hearing the old man in blue's introduction, the two ancestors from the Gue clan and the Gu clan looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. This was because they remembered the powerful man who had followed the Huang clan's ancestor 50 years ago. In addition to the shock in the Gu clan's ancestors' eyes, there was a trace of sadness. After all, the old man in blue had once been madly infatuated with his sister. If he had been able to persuade his father to change his mind, he would have let his sister choose the old man in blue even if he had to completely fall out with the Huang clan. Then, the Gu clan would not only become the #1 clan in Guangling City, but they would also be able to walk out of Guangling City and occupy more territory and obtain more cultivation resources. My surname is Xiao, and my name is Chi Hao. I'm from the Highland Xiao clan. The old man in black did not dare to be arrogant in the face of Shin Hokong's self-introduction. Then he cupped his fist and asked Shin Hokong, Brother Shun, what is your relationship with Yu Haoran? I'm a servant. Shin Hokong replied emotionlessly. Yu Haoran couldn't help but slap his forehead. However, at this moment, he still maintained the body of the ancestral wizard that was 1,000 meters tall. His action of raising his hand to slap his forehead immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. When Yu Haoran detected the crowd's gaze and saw that the unconscious Xiao Ruojia had already returned to his original body, he also dispersed the ancestral wizard's body. Then, he smiled bitterly and complained to Shin Hokong. Elder Shun, didn't we agree that you're my senior? I will always treat you as my senior. In the face of Yu Haoran's grievance, Shin Hokong maintained a calm expression and replied, Etiquette cannot be abandoned, and rules cannot be disobeyed. In response, Yu Haoran could only shrug his shoulders helplessly and stand to the side to watch how he dealt with the old man in black. Brother Shun, for the sake of the Xiao clan, can you let my young master go for the time being? Xiao Kaheo asked respectfully, not believing that Shin Hokong was Yu Haoran's servant at all. Shin Hokong shook his head in response to Xiao Kaheo's request, then pointed at Yu Haoran and said, Brother Xiao, I can't make the decision on this matter. I still need to see what my young master thinks. Elder Shun, in your current state, can you deal with Xiao Kaheo? Seeing that Shin Hokong had given the final decision to him, Yu Haoran quickly thought about it and asked through divine telekinesis. If he doesn't have a lower venerable realm sword, I have a 90% chance of defeating him and a 70% chance of killing him. Shin Hokong answered honestly in response to Yu Haoran's divine telekinesis. But now, if I overdraw a part of my potential or life force, the result will be 50-50. Whether it was the secret method of overdrawing nearly half of the ancestral shaman's blood, or Shin Hokong's method of overdrawing his potential and life force, he didn't want to see it happen. Therefore, seeing Xiao Kaheo's gaze, Yu Haoran finally took a deep breath and kicked Xiao Ruojia to Xiao Kaheo. However, when he kicked Xiao Ruojia, Yu Haoran took away the storage ring on his finger without leaving a trace, which could be considered Xiao Ruojia's punishment. Get out of Guangling City immediately. Yu Haoran reprimanded Xiao Kaheo with a cold expression as he looked at Xiao Kaheo, who had reached out to grab Xiao Ruojie. Kid, the green mountains will not change, and the clear waters will flow forever. We'll meet again in the future. Xiao Kaheo threatened as he helped Xiao Ruojie consume the healing pills. Old man, the green mountains and clear waters are suitable for eternal rest. When we meet again in the future, this young master will make you sleep forever. Yu Haoran, who had never lost in a verbal battle, immediately retorted. Oof. In the face of Yu Haoran's counterattack, Xiao Kaheo snorted disdainfully and then nodded to Shin Hokong. Brother Shun, farewell. I won't see you out. After nodding in response to Xiao Kaheo's farewell, Shin Hokong turned to look at Yu Haoran and asked, Now, my injuries have recovered to 80%. The rest will require time to slowly recuperate. Where do you want to go next? Let's go to the Heavenly Earth Chamber of Commerce to rest for a day. After we leave Guangling City tomorrow, I'll bring you to a good place where you can break through to the third tribulation quasi-revered level. If not for the fact that he had to wait for Shin Hokong to recover from his injuries, he would have left Guangling City long ago after the auction ended. Since he had recovered from his injuries, Yu Haoran decided to continue with the plan that he had made in advance and head to the next heavenly abode that was concealed by the formation. You're the young master. You make the decision. After Shin Hokong nodded in agreement, he took the initiative to stand beside him, with a posture of being willing to be his slave. In response, Yu Haoran rolled his eyes at him and nodded to Bian Xingrui and Yunxiang at the edge of the square. Then, he soared into the sky and returned to the Yu Xiang pavilion. Stepping into the pavilion, before Yunxiang returned, Yu Haoran hurriedly checked the storage ring that he had secretly taken from Xiao Ruojie. F***CK. After his mind entered the storage ring, Yu Haoran could not help but swear due to his uncontrollable excitement. Although the space in Xiao Ruojie's storage ring was not very big, there were 10 spiritual veins sealed by talismans in the ring. A mere disciple of the martial sage realm actually carried 10 spiritual veins with him when he went out to train. How could he not feel envious and jealous? The spirit stones that the Law Enforcement Peak, 100 Feet Peak, Shangshan Bandit Group, Giant Sword Sect, For Symbols Sect, and Huang Clan had painstakingly obtained from the treasuries of these 6 forces were not even 1/10 of the spiritual veins that Xiao Ruojie carried with him. How could he not sigh at the unfairness of the world? Chapter 1002. In the Yu Xiang Pavilion. Elder Shun, I have a small gift for you. Feeling Shin Hokong's gaze, Yu Haoran took a deep breath. After dispelling the depression in his heart, he took out an upper-level 7 spiritual vein and threw it to Shin Hokong. This is an upper-level 7 spiritual vein. After taking the spiritual vein from Yu Haoran, a look of shock appeared on Shin Hokong's face. Elder Shun, use it as you wish. If it's not enough, ask me for more. Even a second tribulation quasi-martial venerable expert was so shocked by an upper-level 7 spiritual vein. Yu Haoran's depression in his heart suddenly eased a lot, and then he pretended to be forthright. This old servant thanks young master for the reward. After putting away the upper-level 7 spiritual vein, Shin Hokong quickly got up and thanked him. In this regard, other than continuing to roll his eyes, he was too lazy to continue to argue with him. While waving his hand to indicate that Shin Hokong did not need to be polite, his consciousness began to discuss with Thaling in the Sea of Consciousness. Thaling, when you wake up, let go to the sea forest of southern border. Yu Haoran, even if there is not a large number of spiritual veins, after your cultivation breaks through to the martial venerable realm, we still have to go to the sea forest of southern border. In the face of Yu Haoran's proposal, Thaling smiled and replied, because there is a heaven-defying opportunity in the sea forest of southern border that will allow your physical body to reach the Emperor realm. Thaling, what kind of heaven-defying opportunity is it? Yu Haoran immediately asked excitedly. It's a secret for now. Shaking his head, Thaling smiled and refused to disclose in advance. In this regard, Yu Haoran could only helplessly give up the idea of continuing to ask. Master, just as Yu Haoran sent the 9 spiritual veins, as well as some elixirs and refining material from Xiao Ruajia's storage ring to Victor, Yunxiang also returned to the Yuxiang pavilion. Yunxiang, come here. Yu Haoran beckoned Yunxiang to come over. How has your cultivation been in the past few days? Did you encounter anything that you don't understand? Motioning Yunxiang to sit down, Yu Haoran asked. In the face of Yu Haoran's questioning, Yunxiang frowned slightly and looked at Xin with a hint of warning in her eyes. Elder Shun is not only your master's elder, but also your martial arts senior. It just so happens that he can give you pointers on your cultivation. Seeing that Xin Hokong was about to get up and leave, Yu Haoran hurriedly reminded him. Slightly getting up and sitting down again, Xin Hokong just wanted to listen to Yunxiang's cultivation experience. He wanted to see if Yu Haoran, who is not even as old as his disciple, had the qualifications to be her master and the ability to give her pointers on her cultivation. Master, disciple's cultivation process has been very smooth these past few days, but the speed of cultivation has made me very puzzled. At this point, Yunxiang directly stimulated the Yuan Qi in her body, revealing the cultivation of a peak 6th grade martial disciple. Yunxiang, transfer a trace of Yuan Qi to your master. Excluding the time spent at the auction, Yunxiang had officially started cultivating the Tao of Poison for only 6 days. In 6 days, her cultivation had reached the peak of the 6th grade martial disciple, which was equivalent to 1 small realm per day. With such a shocking speed of cultivation breakthrough, even the reincarnation of a demon god would not be able to achieve such a crazy speed of improvement. Therefore, Yu Haoran wanted to use the Yuan Qi that she cultivated to see if there was any problem with her. This is the Yuan Qi that contains the spirit's soul, devouring poison. Seeing that the Yuan Qi that Yunxiang transferred out was black, Xin Hokong felt a trace of doubt at the same time. At the same time, he cannot help but want to use his spiritual will to check the Yuan Qi's attributes. But just as his spiritual will approached the black Yuan Qi, an extremely dangerous threat of death caused him to quickly withdraw his spiritual will, and at the same time, he shouted with a frightened expression, "Elder Shun, be quiet." Slightly frowning, Yu Haoran reminded him with some displeasure. Then, he continued to carefully observe the Yuan Qi that contained the spirit's soul, devouring poison. Seeing that Yu Haoran, who was constantly examining the black Yuan Qi with his spiritual will, did not suffer any harm from the spirit's soul devouring poison, the shock in Xin Hokong's heart was like a river overturning the sea. Yunxiang, in the past few years, have you consumed a lot of precious medicinal herbs and elixirs? After careful observation, Yu Haoran found that the black Yuan Qi was very condensed, which meant that Yunxiang was strictly following his instructions to cultivate. But the speed of improvement of the realm could be said to be against the heavens, which meant that there was enough energy to support her rapid cultivation breakthrough. Thinking of Yunxiang's background and Bian Shengrui's doting on her, a thought quickly came to his mind. Yes. Nodding, Yunxiang explained. Ever since they found out that I could not cultivate because of the spirit's soul-devouring poison, the president and a few elders wanted me to walk the path of a physical sage. So when I was very young, they had been feeding me a lot of top-notch medicinal herbs and elixirs. That's right. After getting Yunxiang's confirmation, Yu Haoran nodded and explained after sending the black Yuan Qi back to Yunxiang's dantian. Yunxiang, the reason why your cultivation can improve so quickly is not only because you're suitable for poison cultivation, but also because you have accumulated too much medicinal power in your previous life. According to my inspection just now, the medicinal power accumulated in your body can support your cultivation until you break through to the peak of the 9th grade martial master, so you don't need to worry about your rapid cultivation breakthrough. Thank you, Master. Yu Haoran's detailed explanation solved the doubts in Yunxiang's heart, and she could finally continue to cultivate the poison Tao cannon with peace of mind. But her relaxed mood was suddenly tensed up again because of Yu Haoran's next words. However, the breakthrough of cultivation is just an increase in strength, and it is only the first stage of cultivation. If you want to transform strength into strength, you need to go through the tempering of blood and fire. At this point, Yu Haoran couldn't help but frown. This was because Yunxiang's situation was different from ordinary people. Ordinary martial artists could quickly familiarize themselves with and master the strength of their cultivation breakthrough by comparing notes with their peers. But Yunxiang, who contained the spirit devourer poison, only had one result if she made a move, and that was death. But if she only went through the tempering by killing strange beasts, it would definitely affect the improvement of her combat experience and mental state cultivation. After thinking about it, Yu Haoran finally decided to reveal some of Yunxiang's secrets to Bian Xingrui, and then let him arrange a suitable tempering target for her through the power of the Chamber of Commerce. Yunxiang, go and ask your Uncle Bian to come over. Yes, master. Yunxiang nodded, got up, and quickly left the pavilion. After Yunxiang left the Yuxiang pavilion, Shin Hokong immediately asked nervously, Haoran, why are you not afraid of the spirit devourer poison? Because I have been poisoned by the spirit devourer poison before, and I know how to remove the poison's damage to the soul. Yu Haoran replied with a little concealment. You can refine the spirit devourer antidote pill. Chapter 1003. In the Yuxiang Pavilion, Elder Shun, the process of the spirit devourer poison eroding the divine soul is unpredictable. It is impossible to refine a detoxification pill that specifically targets the poison. Although he didn't want to disappoint Shin Hokong, it was the truth, and Yu Haoran couldn't lie to him. Then how did you get rid of the spirit devourer poison? The expectation on his face was instantly replaced by disappointment. But Shin Hokong still didn't give up and asked. According to my own research on poison, and then combined with the different degrees of erosion of the spirit devourer poison on the divine soul, I have a certain degree of confidence that I can remove and transfer the poison. Shin Hokong was so entangled on how to get rid of the spirit devourer poison, which made Yu Haoran realize that he, who was born as a rogue cultivator, probably still had relatives or close friends who were still alive. Moreover, that person was very likely to be injured by the spirit devourer poison. Young master, how confident are you that you can remove and transfer the spirit devourer poison? Shin Hokong quickly asked. The disappointment on his face was instantly replaced by expectation. It's hard to say. It depends on the situation. As the spirit devourer poison ranked 17th on the Tianxian continent's 100 poison list, no alchemist or poison master in the entire Tianxian continent dared to pat their chest and say that they could get rid of it 100%. Therefore, while Yu Haoran answered cautiously, he also asked directly, Elder Shun, what's the matter with you? After hearing Yu Haoran's interrogation, Shin Hokong suddenly fell silent. He was silent until Yunxiang brought Bian Xingrui into the Yuxiang Pavilion, and he didn't explain why he kept asking about the spirit devourer antidote. In this regard, Yu Haoran didn't continue to press him, but planned to wait for him to figure it out and then tell him. After motioning Bian Xingrui to sit down, Yu Haoran explained Yunxiang's special situation and the difficulties she encountered in detail. However, she did not reveal the poison Dao cannon that she cultivated. Although he was somewhat dissatisfied with Yunxiang cultivating the Dao of poison, Bian Xingrui quickly accepted this reality when he thought about how it was the only way for her to set foot on the Dao of martial cultivation. As for Yunxiang's predicament, he did not feel that it was troublesome at all. Master Yu, do you know what kind of forces are the most common in the Tianxian continent? Bian Xingrui asked. Shaking his head, Yu Haoran indicated that he did not know. If it was in the past, he would have answered the question directly. It was because most likely the number of sects in the entire Tianxian land would exceed 10,000, including the small sects that did not make it into the mainstream. However, ever since Thaling had told him about the 3 grades of inherited family clans, he had a feeling that the number of hidden family clans in the Tianxian land would not lose to the number of sections. Bandits, Bian Xingrui replied with a smile. Bandits. After hearing Bian Xingrui's reply, Yu Haoran's eyes could not help but light up. He immediately knew that Yunxiang's training problem had been solved. There were countless mountains and forests in the profound sky continent. Other than some mountains that were occupied by sects and families with inherited legacies, The remaining mountains and forests were occupied by many ambitious experts and powerhouses. Then, they slowly developed into bandits who claimed the mountains as their kings. These bandits could be said to have done all kinds of evil. If Yunxiang used these people as training targets, not only would she be able to quickly increase her battle experience, she would also not feel too guilty. All right. After nodding his head in agreement with Bian Xingrui's plan, Yu Haoran closed his eyes and chose some of the training resources that he had left for her before leaving Guangling City. The Qingming Mountains were about 47,000 miles away from Guangling City. It was already close to the border between the Southern Mountain Range and the Central Mountain Range. Compared to the Hengduan Mountain Range, the Qingming Mountains not only had a much wider area, but there were also more mountain peaks in the mountain range. Furthermore, it had an unusually abundant amount of spirit qi, which also caused the strange beasts in the mountain range to be very powerful. Standing in the air above the Qingming Mountains, Yu Haoran carefully recalled the route he had taken in his previous life when he accidentally entered the hidden paradise in the Qingming Mountains under the lead of the Void Spirit Mouse. After careful recollections and combining them with his divine sense's observation of the Qingming Mountains, he finally found the exact location of the paradise on the 29th mountain peak in the depths of the mountain range. Elder Shun, follow me. After reminding the silent Shin Hokong who was standing behind him, Yu Haoran directly flew towards the 29th mountain peak in the depths of the mountain range. Yu Haoran, hide immediately. Just as Yu Haoran flew over the 16th mountain peak, Thaling's slightly panicked reminder suddenly came from his sea of consciousness. Without the slightest hesitation, he used his soul power and Yuan Li to directly charge into the 16th mountain peak, then quickly retracted his aura. Although he didn't understand Yu Haoran's inexplicable actions, Shin Hokong also did the same thing because of the 3-point agreement they had made before leaving Guangling City. Thaling, what's going on? After completely concealing himself, Yu Haoran hurriedly asked. Your opponent, my opponent, is currently on the 29th mountain peak. Thaling said with an incomparably solemn expression. Thaling, what exactly do you mean? Your opponent, my opponent. Thaling's explanation not only failed to make Yu Haoran understand, it instead made him even more confused. Yu Haoran, can you give up on the paradise hidden in this mountain range? Thaling didn't answer Yu Haoran's question and asked instead. Thaling, giving up this opportunity isn't a problem, but do I need a detailed explanation? Yu Haoran really didn't understand why Thaling suddenly became so abnormal. Can you wait until I wake up again? Thaling still didn't explain and continued to ask. Thaling, you should know my current state, and also know why I spent nearly half a month to rush to the Qingming Mountains. More and more questions made Yu Haoran gradually feel a trace of hostility in his heart. He knew that if he didn't get an answer, his state of mind would definitely have problems. So he also asked, So, Thaling, in order to ensure that I can smoothly break through to the Martial Saint realm, please tell me what happened. Sigh. After a full half an hour of silence, Thaling couldn't help but let out a long sigh, finally deciding to reveal the most important secret of Yu Haoran's reincarnation. Yu Haoran, leave this place for now, then I will tell you everything in detail. Elder Shun, leave this place. After nodding to Shin Hokong, Yu Haoran directly shot into the sky and quickly left the Qingming Mountains. Chapter 1004. In the Qingming Mountains. As the young man inhaled and exhaled the pure spirit qi in the air, as well as the giant spirit stone he was sitting on, would pour a large amount of pure spirit qi into his body. In the young man's sea of consciousness, there was a saber floating. It was a long saber with a yellow luster. Under the long saber was a middle-aged man in his 40s with a dignified appearance and a fierce temperament. He was absorbing a special power that could not be seen or touched. Just as Yu Haoran left the Qingming Mountains with Shin Hokong, the middle-aged man with a fierce temperament suddenly opened his eyes. His sea of consciousness swept across the entire mountain range in an instant, but he found nothing. Just now, it seemed to be Victor's aura. Could it be that he also succeeded in taking advantage of the demon god's tomb to destroy the heavenly Tao rules and reincarnate 100 years ago? The middle-aged man frowned and muttered to himself after withdrawing his sea of consciousness. Then, his eyebrows relaxed, and a greedy look appeared on his face as he muttered to himself. If Victor also succeeds in returning 100 years ago, then I will have the opportunity to swallow the space-time law contained in Victor. At that time, my mystic Emperor Divine Saber will be able to cut the heavenly Tao rules again and refine the endless energy accumulated in the tomb from 4 eras, becoming an eternal existence between heaven and earth. After listening to Thaling's instructions and quickly leaving the Qingming Mountains, Yu Haoran did not stop. Instead, he used his maximum speed to rush to a restaurant called Luoshui Town. Thaling speak. After finding a seat by the window and casually ordering a few dishes and 2 jugs of strong wine, Yu Haoran signaled to Thaling in his sea of consciousness. Yu Haoran, do you remember before your rebirth when the demon god's tomb exploded? Other than my body, Victor, were there any other magic weapons in the explosion area? Thaling did not immediately explain why he gave up the opportunity in the Qingming Mountains. Instead, he inexplicably asked about his past life experience. Of course I remember. The explosion of the demon god's tomb had allowed him to experience the true meaning of life and death. This was a memory that he would never be able to forget. It seems that apart from your true form, Victor, there's also a long saber that's dark yellow in color, an ancient mirror that people can't look at directly, and 2 other magical artifacts that I didn't notice. Yu Haoran replied directly. It was precisely because his memory was too deep that he didn't need to think about it carefully. Yu Haoran, that long saber with a dark yellow luster is called the mysterious yellow saber. It's a magical item from the same period as mine. As for the other ancient mirror that you can't look at directly, it's called the void mirror. It's also an artifact from the same period as me. Thaling only introduced the origins of the 2 magic tools that Yu Haoran was interested in. According to the time of our birth and the strength of each of us, the yellow blade is the strongest, the void mirror is the weakest, and I happen to be in the middle. At this point, Thaling looked at Yu Haoran, who had separated part of his consciousness and transformed into a body, and asked, I wonder if you've thought of something? Thaling, are you trying to say that when the demon god's tomb exploded, not only did Victor reincarnate back to 100 years ago, but the mysterious yellow saber and the void mirror also returned to the present? Due to the strong fluctuations in his emotions, the body that he had transformed with his consciousness almost dispersed. That's right. While nodding to confirm, Thaling reminded him with an even more solemn expression. Because our true forms are magical artifacts, we don't have the ability to reincarnate. Therefore, the only way to return to the present is with the help of your human soul. Therefore, when the demon god's tomb exploded, apart from you, Yu Haoran, there were 4 other humans who also retained the memories of their previous lives and returned to 100 years ago. Gasp! No, this reaction of surprise could no longer describe Yu Haoran's current mood. Panic, loss, fear, bewilderment, and countless other complex emotions made it impossible for him to think. At this moment, he was like an idiot who had lost consciousness, standing there in a daze. Young master, what's wrong with you? The emotional changes of the separated consciousness affected the changes in the main body's consciousness and emotions, which also attracted the attention of Shin Ho Kong, who had been feeling puzzled. Sensing the drastic changes in Yu Haoran's emotions, he quickly used his soul power to wrap his voice to remind him. Opening his eyes, Yu Haoran forced himself to calm down and replied, Elder Shun, I'm fine. Then he closed his eyes again. Thaling, the reason why you asked me to leave the Green Mist Mountains immediately is it because in the paradise of the 29th mountain peak, there is someone who has reincarnated like me? The awakening of the main body's consciousness led to the awakening of the consciousness in the sea of consciousness. After barely stabilizing his complex emotions, Yu Haoran asked with a bitter smile. That's right. Nodding, Thaling said apologetically. Furthermore, The mystic royal saber has reincarnated with that person. More importantly, the weapon spirit of the mystic royal saber has already recovered to Emperor Wu's soul body. After receiving Thaling's confirmation, Yu Haoran was completely silent. After his reincarnation, the reason why he did not fear any danger and ignored the pressure of any powerhouses was not only because of Thaling's selfless help, but also because he controlled the trajectory of destiny for the next 100 years. Although the destiny of the southern region had changed greatly because of his appearance, the other 4 regions were not affected at all. He could continue to rely on the memories of his previous life to obtain the endless treasures of the other 4 regions in advance, and then climb to the peak of martial arts. But now it seemed like most of the ruins and secret realms that he was familiar with in the other 4 regions had probably fallen into the hands of the other 4 people. After all, his cultivation and talent were the worst among the people who had entered the depths of the demon god's tomb. Thaling, I want to walk around now. The heavy pressure and the despair of the future made Yu Haoran confused for a moment. He did not know what he should do or what he should think. He just felt very irritated in his heart. Looking through the window facing the street, looking at the people coming and going on the street, he suddenly wanted to forget everything and walk around to take a look. Okay. Thaling nodded and did not stop him. This was because he knew that whether Yu Haoran could accept this reality and whether he could turn the pressure into motivation, his consolation and persuasion would have no effect. He could only rely on himself to figure it out. If he could figure it out by himself, then he could start a breakthrough to the martial sage realm. Moreover, Thaling believed that after his mentality had been reborn, he would definitely be able to use the dual laws of life and death. If he could not figure it out, then his achievements in this life would probably forever be stuck at the complete 10th grade martial emperor realm. Chapter 1005. In Luo Shui Town. Elder Shun, you sit by yourself first. I want to go out for a walk. After the separated consciousness returned to his body, Yu Haoran reminded Shin Ho Kong, then got up and left the restaurant, coming to the main street of the town. Then, he followed the pedestrians on the main street and walked aimlessly. When he felt that there was no one around, he unexpectedly found himself in front of a dilapidated courtyard. Through a gap that could barely be called a wall, Yu Haoran saw a pair of siblings sitting in the courtyard. The elder sister was about 8 or 9 years old, with a ponytail, and her appearance could only be considered ordinary. The younger brother was about 5 or 6 years old and was very cute. At this moment, the elder sister was holding a needle and thread to embroider, while the younger brother was looking at the elder sister with his head tilted, but from his drooping eyelids from time to time, one could tell that he was already sleepy. The constant sleepiness finally made the younger brother unable to support his body, and he suddenly fell forward. Although the elder sister had been embroidering, her eyes glanced at the younger brother from time to time, just in time to see him fall forward because he could not maintain his balance in his sleep. Ignoring the iron needle in her hand, the elder sister hugged her younger brother in time, and then endured the pain of the iron needle piercing her palm, and carried her younger brother into the room. Looking at the heartwarming scene in the courtyard, Yu Haoran felt a warm current in his heart, and a happy smile appeared on his face. Yes, it was already a heaven-defying opportunity for him to be able to obtain the favor of the heavens and change the tragic fate of his previous life after reincarnation. Could it be that he could not allow others to obtain such an opportunity? Moreover, the reincarnation that retained the memories of his previous life was only a higher starting point than others. Future achievement still depended on his own efforts, his own struggle, and his own means. In his previous life, the reason why he was not as good as the 4 reincarnated people was because his potential, his background, and his opportunities were far inferior to theirs. Now, with the help of Thaling, his potential had caught up to theirs, and his known and unknown opportunities were not inferior to theirs. Then, did he not have the confidence to catch up and surpass them? No. Since Yu Haoran, swore to climb to the peak of martial arts, then the 4 people who were also reincarnated were the 4 mountains that he had climbed to the peak of martial arts, waiting for him to conquer them one by one. Just as Yu Haoran figured everything out and turned the heavy pressure into motivation to move forward, a mysterious power made him enter a state of epiphany. Not only has my consciousness entered a state of enlightenment, but I've also broken through to the martial sage realm. Just as Yu Haoran was affected by his instincts and sat down cross-legged, Shin Hokong, who had been secretly observing him with his telepathic thoughts, suddenly appeared in front of him. After discovering Yu Haoran's special state, his eyes flashed with envy. However, due to the restriction of the heavenly Tao, he hurriedly put away the envy in his eyes and took out the superior rank, 7 spiritual vein that Yu Haoran had given him. Whether it was an epiphany or a breakthrough to the martial sage realm, they all required the assistance of a large amount of spiritual qi. Although the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in Luoshui town was still sufficient, it was definitely not enough to satisfy Yu Haoran's current situation. Therefore, Shin Hokong planned to use the superior rank, 7 spiritual vein, to help him successfully break through to the martial sage realm. He directly removed the talisman that sealed the spiritual vein. The superior rank, 7 spiritual vein, which had lost its sealing power, instantly began to expand and quickly turned into a white dragon that was thousands of meters long. Break! Using his hands formed from soul power and yuan qi, he directly tore the spiritual vein that had turned into a white dragon into countless pieces. Then, using his powerful strength, he forcibly gathered the torn spiritual vein to Yu Haoran's side. Boom! As a thunderous roar suddenly sounded from Yu Haoran's body, an unimaginably terrifying suction force immediately formed from the top of his head. The terrifying suction force directly sucked the spiritual vein that Shin Hokong had gathered into his body, causing his cultivation and physical body to enter the martial sage realm at the same time. Dual cultivation. Shin Hokong muttered to himself with a shocked expression as he felt the 2 terrifying auras rising from Yu Haoran's body one after another. Moreover, his cultivation and physical body have both broken through to the martial sage realm at the same time. It seems that this kid's potential and temperament far surpass that of some core disciples of inherited families. Perhaps if I accompany him for 10 years, I will also be able to benefit a lot. Just as his cultivation and physical body had both broken through to the martial sage realm at the same time, the sudden increase in the suction force directly devoured 1/10 of the spiritual vein that had gathered. Shin Hokong was not worried about this at all. This was because he believed that no matter how heaven-defying Yu Haoran's potential was, it was impossible for him to directly absorb an entire superior rank, 7 spiritual vein, when breaking through to the martial sage realm. As the aura of the breakthrough in cultivation and physical body reached its peak and then gradually began to fall, Shin Hokong could not help but frown. According to the normal process of breaking through to the martial sage realm, the moment when one's cultivation broke through to the martial sage realm and his aura fell, the power of laws that he had comprehended should appear. However, the fall of his aura meant that the breakthrough in his cultivation and physical body had already ended. However, why was there no fluctuation of the power of laws? Boom! Just as Shin Hokong was feeling puzzled, a sudden clap of thunder sounded from Yu Haoran's body. Accompanied by the clap of thunder, the aura that had just fallen began to rise again. Consecutive breakthroughs in cultivation and physical body. Seeing Yu Haoran's cultivation and fleshly body break through the mid-first grade of the martial saint realm, the late, the peak, and finally the early second grade of the martial saint realm, Shin Hokong finally understood why he had not displayed any fluctuations of power of laws earlier. This was because the power of laws would not be revealed before the breakthrough in the martial sage realm was over. Anyone who dares to trespass within a radius of 5 kilometers shall die. Just as Yu Haoran's cultivation and physical body broke through to the early second grade martial sage realm, 5 experts of the martial sage realm suddenly barged into the area that Shin Hokong had set up with his divine sense in advance. He immediately threatened them with a murderous aura. Sensing Shin Hokong's powerful strength, the 5 experts of the martial sage realm immediately retreated to a radius of 5 kilometers before exchanging glances with one another. I accidentally saw a young man of about 18 or 19 sitting cross-legged beside that expert just now. He must be the descendant of that senior who is breaking through to the martial sage realm. Let's not disturb them. A peak 3rd-grade martial sage reminded his 4 companions. Let's go. The peak 7th-grade martial sage realm expert with the highest cultivation nodded before turning to leave Luo Rivertown. That expert, just now, was definitely a quasi-martial exalt expert who had survived the tribulation. He is an expert that we of the Heavenly Water 5 scatters cannot afford to offend. Chapter 1006. Luo Shui Town. This is the aura of the law of life. Just as Shin Hokong's gaze landed on Yu Haoran, the aura of a law that could rejuvenate the earth and awaken all living things caused him to involuntarily take a few steps back in shock. Disbelief immediately appeared on his face. With the law of life as a foundation, it's possible to cultivate the law of fate and the law of trapping in the future. And these 2 laws of perfection are both among the top 10 heaven-defying laws of the myriad of laws. Just as Shin Hokong was excessively shocked and muttering to himself about Yu Haoran's possible achievements in the future, Yu Haoran once again emitted an aura of a special law. This is the aura of the law of death. Shin Hokong once again took a few steps back due to extreme shock. He found it even harder to control the excitement in his heart as he muttered to himself with a trembling voice. With the law of death as a foundation, it's possible to cultivate the law of destruction and the law of reincarnation in the future. And these 2 laws of perfection are also among the top 10 heaven-defying laws of the myriad of laws. If a top monstrous disciple of a family with a legacy of more than 1,000,000 years can comprehend either the laws of life and death, he can directly become the successor of the family. Then, what about Yu Haoran, who has comprehended both the laws of life and death? In a room on the top floor of the Victor, as the spirit needed to fuse with the law of life for a short period of time during the breakthrough to the martial sage realm, it was not suitable for him to continue staying in Yu Haoran's consciousness. Thus, Thowling could only temporarily return to the Victor. Originally, Yu Haoran had been able to withstand the heavy pressure of being a reincarnated person and turn it into a powerful motivation to successfully break through to the martial sage realm. This was something to be excited and happy about. However, to the Tower Spirit's surprise, Yu Haoran's comprehension of the laws of life was so deep that when the laws of life fused with his soul for a brief moment, it instantly erupted with a tremendous amount of life force. As a result, the injuries of the Tower Spirit's main body began to rapidly recover. Although the accelerated recovery of Victor's injuries was a good thing, Thowling didn't want to fall asleep so quickly due to the tiredness that constantly assaulted him. This was because he still wanted to see if Yu Haoran could successfully comprehend a martial skill formed from the dual laws of life and death. He still had many things to tell Yu Haoran. However, when Victor's comprehension of the law of death temporarily fused with his divine soul, Thowling knew that he wouldn't be able to last until Yu Haoran broke through to the next realm. He took out a blank jade slip that he had prepared beforehand and recorded everything that he wanted to say, the things that he wanted to tell him, as well as the 3 secret techniques that he had carefully prepared. After sending the jade slip to his spirit's sea of consciousness, Thowling reluctantly closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Just as the fluctuations of the law of life and law of death disappeared, Yu Haoran's body emitted a fluctuation of the 3rd law of life. However, the fluctuation of the 3rd law of life didn't shock Shin Hokong in the slightest. Although the law of speed was ranked relatively high among the myriad of laws of life, most experts who were proficient in sword cultivation would be able to comprehend the law of speed. After all, swordsmanship itself was about speed, accuracy, and ruthlessness. Moreover, Yu Haoran could even successfully comprehend the heaven-defying dual laws of life and death. A mere law of speed wasn't worth mentioning at all. Just as the fluctuation of the law of speed began to weaken, Shin Hokong glanced at the spirit vein that had gathered around Yu Haoran. He discovered that nearly half of the upper-level 7 spirit vein had been consumed. He couldn't help but feel incomparably shocked once again. Nearly half of the upper-level 7 spirit vein, if exchanged for first-grade level 9 spirit stones, amounted to nearly 40 billion spirit stones. It could almost pile up into a mountain that was nearly 1,000 meters high. Such a huge amount of spirit stones had only been exchanged for a breakthrough of 1 major realm and 2 minor realms in the end. From this point alone, it could be seen how deep Yu Haoran's accumulation was, how monstrous his potential was, and how terrifying the consumption of the dual laws of life and death was. As the fluctuation of the law of speed gradually disappeared, Shin Hokong was about to put away the remaining half of the spirit vein when he sensed the fluctuation of the law of speed's aura again. However, this time, the fluctuation of the law of speed's aura was clearly different from the fluctuation of the law of speed's aura that he had comprehended. Instead, it seemed to be the fluctuation of power produced by the fusion of different laws. Could this be? As the fluctuation of power became clearer and clearer, a shocking thought flashed through Shin Hokong's mind. Subsequently, he planned to take a risk and use his divine sense to trace the source of the fluctuation of power to see if the truth was as he had guessed. Life, death, death. But at this time, Yu Haoran suddenly opened his eyes and pointed his finger at a poplar tree with a diameter of more than 40 centimeters 30 meters away as he softly shouted. A special fluctuation of power quickly entered the poplar tree. Immediately after, the elm tree that had begun to wither rapidly summoned a powerful vitality. Fresh green leaves grew out of it once again, and new bark grew out of its withered branches. However, in less than a second, the fresh green leaves and branches rapidly withered and fell off. In the next 3 seconds, the poplar tree experienced a second growth and death process. In the end, it turned into a pile of dust and disappeared from the world. This is a heaven-defying martial skill formed by the fusion of the laws of life and death. After seeing the poplar tree experience 3 rebirth and death processes in a short period of time, Shin Hokong confirmed his guess. At the same time, he looked at Yu Haoran with a look of shock and contemplation. Looking at the poplar tree that had completely turned into dust, Yu Haoran shook his head in slight disappointment. After closing his eyes again, he separated a part of his divine sense and sent it into his sea of consciousness. Then, he shouted loudly at the victor. "Thaling, did you see that just now? With the help of the state of epiphany, I have successfully comprehended the martial skill formed by the fusion of the laws of life and death." After shouting for 3 seconds, not only did the expected Thaling's praise not sound, but he also did not appear in front of him. This made Yu Haoran feel a little uneasy. When the body formed by his divine sense was about to step into the victor, he suddenly saw the jade slip that had fallen next to his divine sense. A trace of panic instantly flashed across his face. Bending down to pick up the jade slip, Yu Haoran's breathing gradually became heavier and his face started to turn slightly pale. At this moment, he did not dare to check the information left in the jade slip. He was worried that things would really be as he imagined. Holding the jade slip tightly, after nearly 3 minutes, his breathing gradually returned to normal. In the end, he decided to check the information in the jade slip. As soon as his divine sense came into contact with the jade slip in his hand immediately exploded and turned into countless mysterious yellow gas. Chapter 1007. After searching for 2 hours, she still couldn't find the forbidden words in the first chapter. Yin didn't know when the first chapter would be displayed. Yin would like to apologize for the discomfort caused by skipping the chapter. In Luo Shui Town, Thaling. Yu Haoran felt his eyes heat up as he looked at the Thaling formed by countless mysterious yellow gas. His voice trembled as he shouted, "Yu Haoran, Since your mind has touched the Jade Slip, it means that you have successfully broken through to the martial sage realm. Congratulations, you've successfully defeated your inner demons and crossed the most difficult threshold in your life. Because the Thaling had fallen into a deep sleep to restore Emperor Wu's cultivation base, he needed to gather all of his consciousness and integrate it into his spirit body. Therefore, he had only left behind a bit of pure power in the Jade Slip. Without any support from his consciousness, he couldn't communicate with Yu Haoran. Yu Haoran, I'm sorry. I didn't want to fall asleep so soon, but the dual laws of life and death that you comprehended made the victor recover uncontrollably. As a result, I really couldn't hold on any longer. Yu Haoran, although I didn't witness the entire process of your breakthrough, I believe that with your perseverance and the opportunity of epiphany, you will definitely be able to comprehend the martial skill of the fusion of the dual laws of life and death. Yu Haoran, I don't know how long my deep sleep will last this time, nor do I know how much trouble you will cause with your impulsive personality. However, I sincerely hope that you can temporarily suppress the hostility in your heart and try not to provoke the Yushu Temple and the third-grade inherited families. Yu Haoran, now that you know that your reincarnation isn't unique, you must pay more attention to your safety when you act with the memories of your previous life. Yu Haoran, before I fell asleep, I left 3 jade slips on the first floor of the Victor. The first jade slip recorded a secret method to better comprehend the power of laws. The second jade slip explains in detail how to truly activate and apply for Hao Rankong's demon subduing physique. The third jade slip contains a set of formations. It's a set of compound formations that I've created by combining 999 types of formations. As long as the second clone can completely understand and grasp this set of composite formations, then his cultivation in formations will be able to enter the realm of formation great grandmaster. Yu Haoran, that's all I have to say. I hope that by the time I wake up from my slumber, you will already be at the peak of the 10th grade of the martial saint realm with the laws of life and death at the peak. When the time comes, I will help you become a peerless martial honorable. Yu Haoran is precious. Yu Haoran muttered to himself as he watched the tower spirit, which had been condensed by his spirit energy, disperse into countless wisps of mysterious yellow gas. 2 streams of hot tears flowed uncontrollably from the corners of his eyes. Thaling, when they first met, they were suspicious and guarded against each other. When they got to know each other, they helped and hid things from each other. When they got to know each other, they were selflessly frank and supported each other. Looking at the mysterious yellow gas slowly disappearing in his sea of consciousness, the hot tears in Yu Haoran's eyes gradually disappeared. His panicked expression slowly became firm. Thaling, rest assured and go to sleep. On the day you wake up, not only will I, Yu Haoran, reach the peak of the laws of life and death, but my cultivation and physical body will also advance to the martial honorable realm. After secretly swearing, Yu Haoran stepped into the Victor and took the 3 jade slips that Thaling had left behind before he fell asleep. His consciousness returned to his body. Elder Shun, thank you. After opening his eyes, Yu Haoran sincerely thanked Shin Hokong. Although his consciousness had entered a state of enlightenment and was unable to sense the situation around him, it was definitely due to Shin Hokong's protection that he was able to smoothly break through to the martial saint realm. Moreover, the huge amount of spiritual energy required for the breakthrough of the realm and the fusion of laws was not something that a mere Luoshui town could provide. Young master, you're too polite. This is what I should do. Regardless of whether it was the breakthrough in his cultivation base and physical body grade, the comprehension of the law of life and death, or the fusion of the law of life and death, all of it had completely shattered the pride in Shun Haokong's heart. At this moment, in the face of Yu Haoran's gratitude, he did not dare to be as arrogant as before. There was a hint of respect in his expression. Elder Shun, according to my original plan, I was going to enter a blessed land in the Qingming Mountains and then use the pure spiritual energy in the blessed land to help you break through to the third tribulation quasi-martial honorable realm in one fell swoop. However, there was a temporary change in the Tianming Mountains, causing us to be unable to enter the blessed land for the time being. When he separated his consciousness and entered his sea of consciousness, the consciousness left in his body had been using the spiritual vein to consolidate his cultivation. Although the realm after the breakthrough had not been completely consolidated, it would not affect his actions. Moreover, the current environment was not suitable for him to continue cultivating. Therefore, after ending his cultivation and getting up, Yu Haoran said to Shin Hokong, "However, according to the situation I learned in advance, there seems to be a hidden cave abode of a senior of unknown realm on a mountain peak about 7,000 miles away from Luoshui town. I think we should go to that cave abode and try our luck. Everything is up to you, young master. I have no objections," Shin Hokong said respectfully. Nodding, Yu Haoran turned around and was about to leave when he unexpectedly saw the elder sister in the dilapidated courtyard in front of him. She was frowning as she ate a grapefruit. On the stone table in front of her, there was a bowl of thin porridge. After reluctantly eating the fruit in her hand, the elder sister squeezed out a smile on her face. Then, she woke up her younger brother who had been asleep for a long time and asked him to drink the porridge on the stone table. Looking at the elder sister's action of swallowing her saliva from time to time, Yu Haoran felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. He could not help but recall the year when he was demoted to a handyman. It seemed that his elder sister would rather suffer and starve herself and leave the best things for him. "Little girl, may I know where your parents are?" In his previous life and this life, he had seen countless poor families suffering. He did not really pay attention to them, let alone help them. But for some reason, he suddenly felt pity for the sister and brother in front of him and wanted to help them. Quickly shielding her brother behind her, the elder sister looked warily at Yu Haoran and Shin Hokong, who had stepped into the courtyard. His spiritual sense swept across the dilapidated courtyard and finally found the fruit that the girl had eaten in the narrow kitchen. Using his spiritual sense to send the fruit in front of him, Yu Haoran reached out and picked up the fruit. He then opened his mouth and took a bite. An extremely bitter and stimulating taste made him frown involuntarily. Resisting the impact of the bitter taste on his taste buds, Yu Haoran carefully distinguished the energy contained in the fruit's meat. In the end, he could not help but sigh and say to the girl, "Do you know that this fruit doesn't have any nutrition other than making you feel less hungry? If you use this fruit as food, it will delay your body's development and also shorten your lifespan." Chapter 1008. Sorry, I'm a little late to celebrate Second Aunt's birthday. In Lorraine Town, sigh. Yu Haoran could not help but sigh as he looked at the little girl who did not know the serious consequences of consuming this fruit for a long time. Then, he continued to ask, "You still haven't told me, where are your parents?" Perhaps sensing that the brother in front of her did not seem like a bad person, the little girl turned her head to look at her excited brother and said with reddened eyes, 2 years ago, they had already died of illness. With both parents dead, she had to take care of her brother alone. The little girl's tragic life experience made Yu Haoran quickly associate it with his own life experience, and he was even more determined to help the siblings. But how could he help this pair of siblings who had helped him defeat his inner demons? Leave them with a large sum of wealth? He was afraid that as soon as he left Luoshui town, there would be a daring fellow who would make a move on them. Take them with him? With his current training situation, even a martial emperor expert would find it troublesome, let alone 2 children who were even worse than ordinary people. After thinking about it, Yu Haoran finally decided to send them back to Xianyang City and then hand them over to Qin Lingfei to take care of. "Little girl, I want to send you to a place where you don't lack food or drink and where you can learn to read. Are you willing?" Yu Haoran's face was full of smiles as he asked in a very gentle tone, "Why do you want to help us?" Although she was only 8 or 9 years old, she had already taken on the responsibility of taking care of her brother alone at an early age. This had made the little girl very mature. Therefore, in the face of this big brother's inexplicable kindness, she did not impulsively agree immediately. Instead, she wanted to know the other party's true intentions. To repay a debt of gratitude. Yu Haoran replied with a smile. Repay a debt of gratitude? The little girl could not help but frown as she muttered to herself. Because she had never seen this big brother in front of her before, how could she let him owe her a debt of gratitude? Therefore, a look of suspicion immediately appeared in her eyes. Little girl, some debts of gratitude are not something that you have personally done for the other party. Instead, it is possible that an unintentional action of yours can change a person's life. The debt of gratitude that the little girl in front of him could not be explained with words. Yu Haoran could only describe the general meaning. However, after seeing the suspicion and vigilance in the little girl's eyes, he could not help but feel a headache. He did not know how to make the little girl let down her guard. Looking at the little girl who was protecting her brother behind her back, a familiar memory suddenly surged in his heart. It was when he had just awakened from his rebirth. In the face, of course, Yu Haoran's sister, in order to allow her to get rid of her status as a servant and to obtain a chance. How? At this point, Yu Haoran pointed at the dignified little boy behind her and asked, even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think about your brother. Do you have the heart to see him become a mediocre, ordinary person in the future? Don't you want him to become a person like me, who can control his own destiny and doesn't have to run around for 3 meals a day? How do you want to help us? Yu Haoran's question caused the vigilance in the little girl's eyes to be replaced by desire. Her tone was extremely excited as she asked, my surname is Yu, and my name is Haoran. I am the prince consort of the Emperor Qin Kingdom. I want to send you to the princess and let her arrange your lives. She will also teach you how to read and write. Seeing that the little girl was finally moved, Yu Haoran secretly sighed in relief. He smiled and said his thoughts. When you are 16 years old, if you have the potential to cultivate, I will arrange for the best master to guide you in cultivation so that you can become strong people who can control your own destiny. We are willing. After hearing Yu Haoran's arrangement, the little girl quickly nodded in agreement. Then, she pulled her brother to kneel, intending to kowtow and thank him. Yu Haoran waved his sleeve and used a gentle force to stop the 2 people who wanted to kneel. He then took out a blank ring from his storage ring and recorded how the little girl helped him solve his inner demon, as well as the tragic fate of the siblings in the Jade Scroll. Then his mind connected to the pet space and woke up He Xiong, who was consolidating his breakthrough. Master, after leaving the pet space, He Xiong realized that the surrounding environment was too narrow. He Xiong took the initiative to shrink his body and bowed respectfully. Seeing He Xiong, who could freely change his body shape, there was a trace of fear and excitement in the eyes of the little girl and the little boy. He Xiong, you are in charge of sending them to the palace in Xianyang City. Then, give this jade scroll to Princess Ling Fei. Gesturing for He Xiong to come forward, Yu Haoran pointed at the little girl and the little boy and handed the jade scroll to He Xiong. Yes, master. After receiving the jade scroll, He Xiong waved his bare paw, and a gentle force directly sent the siblings to his back. Then, He Xiong soared into the sky and rushed to Xianyang City at lightning speed. Elder Shun, let's go. Looking at He Xiong, who was quickly turning into a black, Yu Haoran turned his head and reminded Shin Hokong. Then he also soared into the sky and went straight to the mountain peak northeast of Luoshui town. Qingming Mountains, in the blessed grotto heaven on the 29th mountain peak. As more and more cracks appeared on the giant spirit stone, the aura of the young man sitting cross-legged on the spirit stone became stronger and stronger. Boom! As a powerful aura that made the entire space of the blessed grotto heaven tremble rose from the young man's body, countless cracks appeared on the giant spirit stone under him. In the end, due to the loss of the support of spiritual energy, it shattered into powder with a loud bang. Although he had lost the support of the giant spirit stone, the young man did not fall to the ground. Instead, he kept floating in the air. Sigh. As the powerful aura began to recede, the young man who opened his eyes suddenly sighed. After sighing, The young man glanced at the middle-aged powerhouse who condensed his divine sense, lowered his head, and said bitterly, "Saber Spirit, I've completely failed. Dong Yin, don't be discouraged." Looking at the young man who lowered his head in depression, the mystic sovereign saber's divine sense condensed by the divine sense's divine soul body. A cold sneer flashed in the eyes of the mystic sovereign saber's saber spirit. When he saw the young man raise his head, the cold light in his eyes was instantly replaced by worry. Then he comforted him in a gentle tone. Chapter 1009. In the green mist mountains, in the blessed enclave. What a pity! After hearing the sword spirit of the mystic ruler saber's words of consolation, the young man dispersed the soul power that was supporting his floating body. His feet slowly landed on the ground, and he lifted his head to look in the northeast direction. Sword spirit, if I could reincarnate 6 years earlier, not only would I be able to further strengthen my foundation, but I would also have the opportunity to participate in the Southern Region's Hidden Dragon Leaderboard contest. With my previous life's cultivation experience and your help, Sword Spirit, I'm absolutely confident that I'll be able to obtain first place in the Southern Region's Hidden Dragon Leaderboard contest. By then, with the strongest foundation and the gathering of the region's Hidden Dragon Leaderboard, I'll definitely be able to cross the third calamity and break through to the martial honorable realm. I'll become a peerless powerhouse. In the face of the young man's unreconciled complaints, a disdainful sneer flashed across the sword spirit's eyes. However, it was quickly replaced by a calm expression. Dong Yin, where do you plan to go next? Since my cultivation has entered the quasi-martial honorable realm, I'll need to be prepared to cross the third calamity. After hearing the sword spirit's question, the young man called Dong Yin turned around and looked at the sword spirit's divine telekinesis as he explained. About 8,000 miles northeast of the Green Mist Mountains, there's a mountain peak that's more than 3,000 meters tall. There's a hidden cave that was left behind by a third calamity peak quasi-martial honorable rel powerhouse. There's a 4-step first rank 5 life profound gate pill and a 4-step third rank ice heart J-bone pill inside the cave. I plan to use these 2 pills to cross the heart calamity and body calamity as soon as possible. Then, I'll take the risk and enter the heavenly water secret realm. I'll try to break through to the martial honorable realm there. All right, we'll do as you say. After hearing the young man's arrangement, the sword spirit nodded in agreement. The sword spirit's divine telekinesis, transformed into a divine telekinesis, directly entered the young man's mind. Looking at the mountain peak that was more than 3,000 meters tall in front of him, Yuhaoran habitually ordered as he felt the powerful aura that occasionally emerged from the mountain peak. Thowling, use your divine sense to the limit and help me check the level of the strongest exotic beast on mountain. However, after waiting for nearly 10 seconds and not receiving any reply from Thowling, he suddenly remembered that Thowling had entered a state of deep sleep to restore the strength of Emperor Wu's realm. Sighing inwardly, Yuhaoran turned his head and ordered Shin Hokong. The second doppelganger instructed. According to the second doppelganger's instructions, the spirit dispersing handprint quickly merged with the star position. Earth Gate, Wind Force. The second doppelganger pointed out the 9 power nodes of the formation in succession. Yuhaoran's spirit dispersing handprint was also imprinted on the power nodes. When the spirit dispersing imprint was imprinted on the last node, the 3 pine trees that were in the shape of the letter E quickly merged together. Then, from the roots of the 3 pine trees, a hole about 2 meters high and 1.5 meters wide appeared. Old Shun, the hole will only appear for 5 seconds. Hurry up and come in, Yuhaoran reminded Shin Hokong as he rushed into the hole. Shin Hokong, who had an extraordinary background, was not surprised by Yuhaoran's speed in breaking the concealment formation at the entrance of the cave. Therefore, when Yuhaoran rushed into the hole, he also rushed into the hole at the same time. In the end, the 2 of them entered the hole almost at the same time. Looking at Shin Hokong, who rushed into the hole at the same time as him, Yu Haoran revealed a mysterious smile on his face. Then, when he was about to enter the cave through the passage in front of him, he suddenly thought of the young man who was reincarnated together with a mystic royal saber in the Qingming Mountains. Brother Ran, can you use the concealment formation to set up a surveillance formation? For some reason, when the mystic royal saber and the reincarnated young man appeared in his mind, Yu Haoran suddenly felt flustered. It was as if the mystic royal saber and the reincarnated young man could threaten his life. It was better to be safe than sorry. In order to ensure safety, to avoid accidents, and to ease his flustered emotions, Yu Haoran discussed with the second doppelganger. No problem. Yu Haoran nodded. Without needing the cooperation of Yu Haoran, the second doppelganger used the knowledge of formations imparted to him by Thaling and integrated his divine thought into the concealment formation. He quickly set up a surveillance formation that would be able to sense as soon as the concealment formation was activated. When the second doppelganger successfully set up the surveillance formation, Yu Haoran secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 10:10. Inside the mountain cave, he did not use his divine sense to be alert of the dangers around him, nor did he slow down his pace. It was as if he had been here before. This caused Shun Haokong, who was following closely behind Yu Haoran, to reveal a trace of doubt in his eyes. However, according to the 3 points of agreement when they left Guangling City, unless Yu Haoran took the initiative to explain, he could not take the initiative to ask. Helpless, he could only temporarily suppress his doubts and make up his mind to find an opportunity to discuss with Yu Haoran to see if he could change the 3 points of agreement. After all, the more time he spent with Yu Haoran, the more puzzles he encountered and the more doubts he accumulated. This made him feel more and more uncomfortable. The passageway leading to the cave was not very long, less than 5 miles. As the spirit qi in the passageway became denser, Yu Haoran's pace became faster and faster. When a green stone door about 5 meters tall and 3 meters wide came into view, Yu Haoran knew that he had arrived at the cave left behind by the powerhouse. Brother Ran, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you again. Carefully observing the green stone door in front of him, and then combining it with what he had heard in his previous life and his understanding of formations, he knew that there were 2 ways to open the green door in front of him. The first way was to use a special key that could open the green door. Unfortunately, he did not have it. The second way was to remove the defensive formation of the cave and then use brute force to break the green door and directly enter the cave. Green concentration formation, a defensive formation of the mid-grade of the Earth level. After setting up the surveillance formation at the entrance of the cave, the second doppelganger did not return a victor, but stayed in his sea of consciousness. Therefore, when he was observing the green door, the second doppelganger was also observing at the same time and recognized the origin of the formation. Can you break it? Yu Haoran asked nervously. Yes. The second doppelganger nodded and said seriously. But it will take a certain amount of time. How long? Yu Haoran asked. If it's fast, it'll take 40 minutes. If it's slow, it'll take 1 hour. While replying to Yu Haoran's questions, the second clone began to crack the defensive formation of the cave abode. Yu Haoran couldn't help but sigh when he heard that the second clone would need nearly an hour to break through the defensive formation of the cave abode. If Thaling was not asleep, then with his cultivation in array formations, it would only take a few minutes to break the defensive array formation of the cave abode. However, he could only think about it now and reminisce about it in his heart. He still needed to adjust his mentality as soon as possible and adapt to life without Thaling. After waiting for nearly an hour, Yu Haoran did not want to just sit there and do nothing. He sat down cross-legged and told Shin Hokong that he needed to use his divine thought to remove the defensive formation of the cave abode. After that, he began to cultivate the secret method that Thaling had left behind to improve his comprehension of the power of laws. As for when he would help Shin Hokong activate the special demon-subduing physique, it would depend on when he would confess everything to him. After all, After this period of contact, he discovered that Shun Haokong was hiding too many secrets. Before he truly understood these secrets, he couldn't be at ease to increase Shun Haokong's strength, so as to avoid the hidden dangers of nurturing a tiger and inviting calamity. Time passed by minute. With the help of the secret method left behind by Thaling, he found that among the 3 types of laws that he had comprehended, the speed of comprehension and improvement of the law of speed was the fastest. The progress of the dual laws of life and death was very slow. Yu Haoran was not too worried about this. This was because Thaling had once explained to him that the dual laws of life and death were the closest to the power of laws to the origin. It was very difficult to quickly improve the comprehension of these 2 types of laws through hard work alone. Only through the tempering of life and death, and only through coincidental epiphanies, could it be possible to realize the opportunity to leap forward. And he knew that he would never lack the tempering of life and death. Brother Yu, the defensive formation has been successfully removed. It had only been half an hour since the second clone began to remove the defensive formation, so he still needed to wait a little longer. As a result, Yu Haoran planned to continue using the secret method to improve the law of speed, and then use the comprehension of the law of speed to achieve a rapid breakthrough in his cultivation, so that he could obtain a higher ranking in the Hidden Dragon rankings. However, at this moment, the voice of the second clone suddenly rang out in his head. So fast, Yu Haoran was pleasantly surprised and asked in confusion, "The compound formation that Thaling gave me when he was in slumber can increase the cultivation of formations at a terrifying speed." The second clone could not help but sigh emotionally when he heard Yu Haoran's question. "Earlier, as I removed the formation, I studied the formation that Thaling gave me. I found that in this state, not only can it increase the speed of the removal of the defensive formation, but it can also increase my cultivation of formations even faster." With that, the second clone directly looked at the soul of the main body and requested, "So, I hope that you could go to more places with different types and levels of formations to train, so that I can break through to the great Grandmaster realm of formations as soon as possible." "Okay, I got it." After responding to the second clone, Yu Haoran stood up and took out the purple cudgel. Immediately after, he mobilized the physical strength of the ancestral, and waved the purple cudgel in his hand, slamming it heavily on the green stone door in front of him. Boom! With a loud bang, the green door, which had lost the support of the defensive formation, was just a relatively hard stone. Under the attack of the cudgel, which was enhanced by the physical strength of the ancestral, countless stones were instantly smashed into pieces. As the green door was smashed by the purple cudgel, a rich and pure spiritual energy emerged from the smashed green door. "Elder Shun, let's go." Turning his head to remind Shin Haokong, Yu Haoran held the purple cudgel tightly and rushed into the cave residence. Fearing that Yu Haoran would be in danger, Shin Haokong took the lead to rush into the cave residence with his powerful strength. From the hidden position of the cave residence and the tight protection of the double formation, Shin Haokong was originally full of expectations for the environment inside the cave residence. However, when he rushed into the cave residence and saw everything ordinary in front of him, a trace of disappointment flashed in his eyes. Although he was disappointed, he had spent so much effort to enter the cave residence, so he must have carefully checked the collection in the cave residence. Therefore, Shin Haokong mobilized the divine thought of the peak of the third tribulation quasi-martial venerable realm and directly scanned the entire cave residence. In the end, he found nothing. The disappointment in Shin Haokong's eyes and the action of using divine thought to scan the cave residence was clearly seen by Yu Haoran and felt it clearly. Chapter 10-11. Inside the cave. Yu Haoran was actually not very familiar with the cave in front of him. He had only heard about it when he passed by Qingyang City, which was about 1,000 kilometers away from this mountain, when he returned to the southern region after achieving great success in the way of poison. It was said that the owner of the cave was a peak third tribulation quasi-martial venerable. At the same time, he was also a great grandmaster who was proficient in alchemy and formations. It was said that the cave contained a lifetime collection of the peak third tribulation quasi-martial venerable. There were a large number of fourth and third level top pills. It was said that this seemingly ordinary cave abode had its own secrets. It was just that it was concealed by a profound formation. It was said that the cave contained the legacy of the peak third tribulation quasi-martial venerable. It was said, of course, he was not sure whether it was true or not. That was because he had only stayed in Qingyang City for a very short time in his past life. He had no interest in investigating a useless cave that had already been discovered and excavated. From beginning to end, from inside to outside, after close to 5 minutes of careful observation, Yu Haoran's eyes gradually became filled with doubt. The cave in front of him was actually similar to a shrunken version of a third-rate sect. It had a teaching room specially used for teaching and dispelling doubts, a cultivation room specially used for cultivation, an alchemy room specially used for alchemy, an alchemy room specially used for forging weapons, and a treasury specially used for storing various treasures. However, these rooms were completely empty. Not to mention valuable treasures, they didn't even have the most basic equipment. Wait, just as he began to wonder why these rooms did not even have the most basic equipment, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Returning to the alchemy room that he had just checked, Yu Haoran began to check the place suitable for placing the alchemy furnace according to his habits as an alchemist. After confirming the basic location, he pressed his hand against the ground and carefully felt the temperature of the ground. The doubt in his eyes gradually disappeared. "Brother Ran, have you discovered anything unusual about this cave?" Pulling back his hand and standing up, Yu Haoran retreated to the door of the alchemy room and asked the second clone in his sea of consciousness. "It should be an extremely advanced, illusory formation," the second clone said with a frown. "But until now, I still haven't seen the origin of the illusory formation, nor have I found any flaws in the formation." "Brother Ran, how can you maintain the formation for a long time?" The problem that the second clone faced was the cleverness of the master of the cave. However, to Yu Haoran, who had discovered the flaws, he already had a solution. However, he would not directly tell the second clone. He only hoped that through his reminder, he could let him experience and discover it himself. This would also increase his knowledge of formations. "Brother Yu, have you discovered something?" Hearing the relaxed tone in Yu Haoran's interrogation, the second clone guessed that he might have found the key to the problem and hurriedly asked, "Brother Ran, you should answer my question first." Without answering the second clone's question, Yu Haoran gestured for the clone to continue the previous topic. In response, the second avatar shrugged and explained with a somewhat helpless expression. "Under normal circumstances, there are 2 ways. The first way is to store enough energy for the formation to operate, such as a large number of spirit stones or spiritual veins. However, this method has a shortcoming. It will be affected by the changes in the terrain, causing slight deviations in the formation. Eventually, the formation's power will gradually weaken until it completely fails. The second way is to use formation flags to stabilize the space of the formation. This can prevent the formation from being affected by the changes in the terrain. At the same time, the formation flags can be used to guide the spirit chi into the formation, so that the formation..." At this point, the second clone gradually realized where the problem was. Judging from the fact that the concealment and defense formations of the cave mansion had been broken, this cave mansion must have existed for more than 10,000 years. After such a long time, the power of the formation in the cave mansion had not weakened at all. This meant that the means to maintain the formation of the entire cave mansion must be arranged with formation flags that could automatically guide the spirit chi. Thinking of this, the second clone immediately spread out his divine thought, then began to observe from the top of the cave mansion. Finally, he found the flaw of the formation. 9 by 9 to 1 yuan formation. After retracting his divine thought, the second clone said in shock, "That's right." While nodding to confirm, Yu Haoran exited the elixir room and slowly rose into the air. Then he looked down at the elixir room, weapon room, Taoist room, treasure room, and other necessary facilities of the 9 sections. There was a hint of admiration in his voice. Using the most ordinary and least noticeable building structure as formation flags, and then incorporating an illusory formation that targets sight, divine thought, and feelings. It seems that the owner of this cave mansion not only has a profound cultivation of formations, but also has a good understanding of human nature. Brother Yu, watch me next. While nodding in agreement with Yu Haoran's praise of the owner of the cave mansion, the second clone also wanted to break the defense formation of the cave mansion to test the cultivation of the owner of the cave mansion in alchemy. Be careful, Yu Haoran reminded in a serious tone. After all, no one knew the real origin of the owner of the cave mansion, nor did they know the temperament of the owner of the cave mansion. Therefore, they did not know whether there were other dangerous formations in the cave mansion besides the defense formation and illusory formation. Got it, the second clone responded. Then, using the spirit-breaking handprint and the means of divine thought, he began to break the defense formation of the cave mansion. Boom! Just as the second clone was breaking the defense formation of the cave mansion, a deafening roar suddenly sounded from the mountain peak outside the cave mansion. Accompanied by the continuous roar, a green figure on the mountain peak was fighting against 3 quasi-venerate exotic beasts alone. Although the cultivation of the green figure had just broken through to the quasi-martial honorable realm, he was not at a disadvantage when facing the joint attack of a second tribulation quasi-martial honorable realm beast and 2 first tribulation quasi-martial honorable realm beasts. Draw your saber. Using the rebound force formed by the strong force of the fight, the green figure retreated a few meters in a flash. Then, the natal saber in his hand, which was at the peak of the superior grade saint realm, drew a ray of light from bottom to top. This ray of saber light, which was infused with soul power, origin energy, and the power of law, was unstoppable and directly killed one of the first tribulation quasi-venerable exotic beasts. Then, using the time he took to catch his breath, the green figure, who had gathered his strength again, waved the saber in his hand again. Water break, accompanied by a soft shout, a ray of saber chi that seemed to be able to cut through the void instantly killed another first tribulation quasi-venerable exotic beast. Chapter 10-12. At the peak of the mountain, the young man in green sneered as he watched the second tribulation quasi-venerate exotic beast escaping from the peak. Then, he pointed at the second tribulation quasi-venerate exotic beast that had escaped hundreds of miles away and yelled softly, "Death and decay." A special force that ignored time and space shot into the body of the second tribulation quasi-venerate exotic beast that was escaping from the peak. Immediately after, the second tribulation quasi-venerable beast's body quickly disappeared without even letting out a scream. In less than 2 seconds, the 70-meter-tall second tribulation quasi-venerate exotic beast turned into a set of eerie white bones and fell from the sky. Ignoring the eerie white bones that fell from the sky, the young man in green put away his natal sword and appeared in front of the 3 pine trees halfway up the mountain in a flash. "Saber Spirit, sorry to trouble you." Looking at the 3 pine trees in front of him, the young man in green signaled to the Saber Spirit in his sea of consciousness. "It's just a low-grade, Earth-level dust avoidance formation. Watch how I break it," the Saber Spirit said disdainfully as he scanned the 3 pine trees with his mind. Then, a powerful divine thought condensed into a long mystic royal saber and tore apart all the formation points, exposing the cave under the 3 pine trees. Without any hesitation, the young man in green rushed into the cave. Inside the cave, with the help of the Spirit Breaker seal and the divine thought, it was continuously imprinted on the 9 unique buildings of the cave. The originally ordinary cave gradually changed. Under Yu Haoran's expectant gaze and Shun Haokong's incredulous gaze, the ordinary immortals' cave quickly turned into a paradise that resembled a paradise. After taking a deep breath, Howard vaguely felt a significant improvement in his cultivation and physical body grade after the pure spiritual chi that was close to liquid entered his body through his pores. Now, his cultivation and physical body were already at the early second grade of the martial saint realm. Just by absorbing the pure spiritual chi instinctively, his body was able to reach such a level of improvement. This meant that there was at least a spiritual vein at the low fifth grade hidden in this cave. After quickly landing on the ground, Howard reminded the shocked Shin Hokong, "Elder Shun, there is no time limit for this cave. We can stay here for a very long time. Therefore, you can use the pure spirit chi in the cave to break through your cultivation. You can also walk around and choose the treasures you like." Taking a deep breath, Shin Hokong suppressed the shock in his heart and said firmly, "Young master, this old servant wants to make a breakthrough first." The three tribulations of the quasi-martial honorable realm were the mind tribulation, the soul tribulation, and the body tribulation. A few decades ago, he had successfully passed the soul tribulation and body tribulation. The only thing left was the heart tribulation. However, during the few decades of fighting the heart tribulation, his mental cultivation had long been tempered to the point where it was sufficient to break through to the martial revered realm. Therefore, the heart tribulation was not dangerous to him at all. He could transcend it at any time. However, ever since he met and followed Howard, he had seen too many incomprehensible things. More and more doubts accumulated in his heart. He was worried that if this continued, it would likely form a new heart tribulation. Therefore, he planned to immediately transcend the heart tribulation of the three tribulations while he was still able to control the heart tribulation to avoid an uncontrollable situation in the future. Okay. Nodding in agreement with Shin Hokong's choice, Howard stepped into the elixir room. Shin Hokong did not deliberately choose a place to cultivate. He directly bent his knees and sat cross-legged on the ground. With the help of the rich and pure spirit chi in the cave, he began to make a breakthrough in his cultivation. He reached out and pushed open the door that was automatically closed by the formation. Soon after, a wave of rich pill fragrance assaulted his senses. 4th level, 9th level, 5 elements, restoration pill. Just by the pill fragrance, Howard knew the origin of the pill that emitted the pill fragrance. Stepping into the elixir room, there was a pill furnace about 3 meters high with a round cloud cover and 3 feet on the ground. Walking slowly to the pill furnace, Howard reached out and pressed on the pill furnace. Carefully feeling it, he found that the pill furnace in front of him was the most common grade pill furnace. This made him feel a little strange. As an elixir room specialized in alchemy, why would there be an ordinary common grade pill furnace? Because such a common grade pill furnace could not be used to refine pills with the high temperature of the earth fire and the powerful strength contained in the origin energy. Shaking his head, Howard no longer paid attention to the common grade pill furnace. His attention began to focus on the back of the pill furnace, a desk against the wall. On the desk, there was a set of 4 treasures of the study, which made Howard feel even more strange. Walking slowly to the front of the desk, his eyes swept from the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone one by one, and finally stopped on a piece of white paper with writing. Yin and Yang softening, using the invisible world as the furnace, using the Dantian heart fire as the supplement. This is the great Tao of formless pill condensation. Although the words on the white paper seemed very profound, to Howard, it was equivalent to a bolt from the blue. He took a dozen steps back, all the way until he reached the elixir furnace, and then looked at the white paper on the table with an incomparably shocked expression. This was because the words just now represented a rumor. A pill deity had spent countless years pursuing a realm, or perhaps it could be said to be a secret technique. That was to use the invisible world as the pill furnace, and the most common Dantian heart fire as the refining method, to refine pills at any time and place. And this secret technique was called the pill condensation technique by that pill master. But in the end, reality proved that this idea did not make sense at all. Because the world was invisible, it was impossible to gather the spiritual energy of pill liquids. Using the Dantian heart fire as the refining method, it did not have the ability to refine medicinal herbs into spiritual liquid. However, from the handwriting left on the white paper, Yu Haoran knew that the alchemist who wrote this sentence seemed to have successfully mastered the pill condensation technique. Taking a deep breath and forcibly suppressing the shock in his heart, Yu Haoran directly picked up the white paper on the table, then flashed out of the alchemy room and went straight to the treasure house where the treasures were stored. He wanted to see if there was a cultivation method jade slip of the pill condensation technique in the treasure house. But just as he passed by the cultivation room, a sense of familiarity suddenly emerged in his heart, as if there was something he needed in the cultivation room. Not rashly entering the cultivation room, Yu Haoran first used his divine sense to check. After confirming that there was no danger in the cultivation room, except for a corpse that had passed away many years ago, he pushed open the door of the cultivation room and stepped into the room. But just as his feet stepped into the cultivation room, the door closed automatically. Then, the corpse that had been dead for many years suddenly raised its head, scaring him into a defensive posture immediately. Chapter 10:13. Inside the cave. Phew. Using his divine sense to check the entire place, Yu Haoran couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief after confirming that the corpse was only affected by the wind. Then he first observed the cultivation room and found that there was nothing in the cultivation room other than the corpse. He then slowly walked to the corpse. This was the corpse of a middle-aged expert. Although he had been dead for more than 10,000 years, his strong physical cultivation and the nourishment of the pure spirit qi in the cave allowed the corpse to maintain its lifelike appearance. His gaze moved from the corpse's face down and finally stopped at the corpse's abdomen. There was a silver-white ring on the left hand's finger that was placed flat on the abdomen. Without thinking, he knew that the silver-white ring was definitely the corpse's storage dharma artifact. "Senior, I'm sorry." After cupping his fist and apologizing to the corpse, Yu Haoran reached out to take off the silver-white ring on his finger. The corpse's closed eyes suddenly opened, and a gloomy smile appeared on his face. "Not good." Hearing the gloomy smile from the corpse, Yu Haoran knew that things were not good. He instinctively mobilized his origin energy and wanted to quickly retreat. But at this moment, the left hand placed on his abdomen grabbed his arm with lightning speed. An indescribable pain made him grimace uncontrollably. At the same time, an unimaginably strong force directly fixed him in place. Not only was he unable to mobilize the origin energy in his Dantian, but even his spirit was firmly fixed. After that, a strand of divine sense entered the corpse's body, from the blood vessels to the meridians, from the muscles to the internal organs, from the Dantian to the sea of consciousness. After carefully observing everything from head to toe, the corpse opened its eyes and said excitedly, "This old man has used the second stage 9th grade annihilation pill that I refined myself to enter a state of suspended animation for 19,967 years, waiting for the appearance of a monstrous genius with a perfect physique." After such a long time, this old man had almost given up. Because the second stage 9th grade annihilation pill's effect can only last for 20,000 years, but I didn't expect that the heavens would favor me, Miao Sangshui, and send such a perfect body to me when this old man's life is about to come to an end. While listening to the Miao Sangshui's excited mutterings, Yu Haoran discussed countermeasures with his second clone. "Brother Ran, from what this old man said, he wants to take over my body. Can you set up a death trap or killing array in my sea of consciousness? When the time comes, we'll kill this old man." Although Yu Haoran's body and soul were both divine sense, he didn't panic too much. This was because the second clone in his sea of consciousness could transfer his soul into the victor. With the mysteriousness and power of the Domain Tower, even a peerless expert of the martial venerable realm or an almighty of the martial emperor realm would not be able to enter the Domain Tower without the permission of the Tower Spirit. let alone the third tribulation, quasi-martial, venerable, Miao, Sangshui. It was impossible for them to break through the domain tower's defenses. However, Yu Haoran didn't want to escape from the other party's threat. What he really wanted was to kill the other party and use the soul-searching secret technique to check the other party's memories. This was because when Miao Sangshui was excitedly muttering to himself, he revealed a very important piece of information, which was that he could refine the second stage 9th grade annihilation pill. This meant that his alchemy cultivation wasn't the legendary alchemy grandmaster, but rather the alchemy emperor realm. If he could obtain Miao Sangshui's alchemy cultivation experience, then he could use it to advance his alchemy cultivation to the alchemy grandmaster realm in one fell swoop. Given the strength of the other party's soul, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for my array to trap him. I can only use the soul annihilation array left by the Thaling. The second clone, which was connected to Yu Haoran's mind, had already thought of a way to counterattack. Okay, we'll do as you say. After hearing the second clone's plan, Yu Haoran quickly nodded in agreement. He'd once heard the pagoda spirit introduce the soul annihilation formation to him. It was a high-grade Earth-rank formation that specialized in weakening the strength of the soul, and it just happened to be suitable to deal with a soul like Miao Sangshui that wanted to take over his body. Young man, since you've delivered yourself to me, I'll give you two choices. His free right hand waved at Yu Haoran, and the body that had been immobilized was suddenly able to move. Tell me, to set up the soul annihilation array, not only did he need to use the array flags refined by the Thaling in advance, but he also needed a certain amount of time to set it up. Therefore, Yu Haoran needed to give his second clone time to set up the array. The first choice is for your soul and consciousness to leave your sea of consciousness and give your body to me, Miao Sangshui said with a sinister smile. Frowning slightly, Yu Haoran pretended to think for 30 seconds before asking for the second choice. The second choice is for me to refine your soul body directly. I can also take over your body. Miao Sangshui threatened with a ferocious expression. Senior, can you give me some time to think about it? His eyes that could move immediately showed a trace of panic, and his voice trembled as he pleaded. Sure. Miao Sangshui nodded in agreement without any doubt. The reason why he gave Yu Haoran time to think was that he had slept for too long with the help of the silent destruction pill, which caused his soul body to be very weak. The young man in front of him was only 18 or 19 years old, but his cultivation was already at the early stage of the second grade martial saint. This meant that his potential was very outstanding, and his soul body must be very strong. Miao Sangshui was worried that he might not be able to defeat his opponent in his soul body, so he agreed to his request in order to play it safe. Seeing the hesitation in Yu Haoran's eyes from time to time, Miao Sangshui knew that threats alone were not enough. He hurriedly cleared his throat. Young man, don't worry. As long as your soul and consciousness can leave the sea of consciousness obediently, I promise you that I will definitely find you an even more perfect body. Not only will you be able to continue living, but the speed at which your cultivation and strength will increase will be far greater than if you use this body. Really? Yu Haoran immediately pretended to be surprised and asked. At the same time, the consciousness that had entered his sea of consciousness quickly asked about the arrangement of the array. 10 seconds. Give me 10 more seconds, and I will be able to complete the arrangement. The second doppelganger that was using all his strength to form the array replied in a hurried tone. Of course, always do what I say. Miao Sangshui patted his chest with his right hand, showing that he was a very trustworthy person. Chapter 10:14. Inside the cave. Sure. The Miao Sangshui nodded in agreement when he saw the excitement in Yu Haoran's eyes. Brother Yu, it's done. Just as the Miao Sangshui agreed to give him time to consider, the second doppelganger's voice sounded in his mind, indicating that the formation was complete. Yu Haoran took a deep breath. Originally, he wanted to use his sharp words to completely infuriate Miao Sangshui to the point that Miao Sangshui would recklessly enter his sea of consciousness. However, Yu Haoran's second clone that was hiding in the Soul Annihilation formation suddenly frowned and hastily warned him. Brother Yu, wait a moment. What's wrong? The separated consciousness wanted to return to the main body, but after hearing the second doppelganger's reminder, he quickly turned around and asked. A peerless powerhouse tore through the concealment formation and barged into the cave. With the help of the surveillance formation and the dust avoidance formation, the second doppelganger could sense it personally and warned him with a serious expression. Are you sure? Yu Haoran asked in disbelief. A peerless powerhouse was a title for a martial honorable. Now that the rules of heaven were not complete, a peerless powerhouse in the martial honorable realm could not be born for the time being. Even if he used a special secret treasure to avoid the surveillance of the rules of heaven, he would never dare to use the power of a martial honorable. Otherwise, the punishment of the rules of heaven would be to directly erase his existence. As a lower Earth-class concealment formation, even a great grandmaster who is proficient in formations and whose cultivation has reached the peak of the third tribulation quasi-martial honorable realm would not be able to break through all the points of the dust avoidance formation in an instant. The second doppelganger confirmed that the powerhouse who had barged into the cave was a peerless powerhouse in the martial honorable realm through the process of the formation being broken. Yu Haoran could not help but frown when the second doppelganger confirmed it. This was because he could not figure out how the other party could use the power of a martial honorable under the surveillance of the rules of heaven. However, when he saw the victor floating in his mind, an idea flashed through his mind. He knew who had barged into the cave. Brother Ran continued to hide in the Soul Annihilation Array. Yu Haoran instructed the second doppelganger, and the separated consciousness quickly returned to the main body. Yu Haoran took a deep breath, then put on a thoughtful expression and nodded in agreement to the other party's request. Senior, I agree to your request, but I hope that you can keep your promise. After this, you must help this junior find a more outstanding physical body. Young friend, you can rest assured that I, Miao Tsang Shui, will keep my word. Miao Tsang Shui was pleasantly surprised by Yu Haoran's reaction. Then he loosened his grip on Yu Haoran's arm and patted his chest as he promised. Senior, please wait for a moment. After Junior's consciousness returns to the divine soul, Junior will immediately leave the sea of consciousness and return my body to Senior. After receiving Miao Tsang Shui's promise, Yu Haoran immediately looked relaxed. He then closed his eyes and pretended that his consciousness had returned to the divine soul and was ready to leave the sea of consciousness. Miao Tsang Shui, who was also preparing to return his consciousness to the divine soul and occupy Yu Haoran's sea of consciousness and physical body, suddenly frowned. Then, an extremely powerful divine thought passed through the cave and saw the young man in green who had just rushed to the cave. Yu Haoran took this opportunity to secretly separate a strand of divine thought and found Shin Hokong, who had successfully passed the mind test and was trying his best to consolidate his cultivation. Elder Shun, don't ask anything. Now, immediately use the invisibility secret method that you are good at and hide as much as possible. Seeing Shin Hokong frown quickly, Yu Haoran's strand of divine thought quickly assured him. After the matter of the cave is over, let's have a good talk. Okay. Although he didn't directly say what he wanted to talk about, Shin Hokong knew that Yu Haoran intended to solve the doubts that had accumulated in his heart during this time. Therefore, he didn't ask why Yu Haoran wanted him to hide. Instead, he used a special family secret method to completely blend into the surrounding environment. The strand of divine thought sensed carefully. After confirming that there was no trace of Shin Hokong, the divine thought quickly returned to the divine soul. Then Yu Haoran secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Then he opened his eyes slightly and glanced at the Miao Tsang Shui, whose face was gradually turning pale, and immediately knew that the other party was in trouble. In this regard, in addition to a trace of joy in his heart, he also planned to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. He wanted to see who was stronger and who was weaker between the Miao Tsang Shui and the young man with the mystic emperor's saber, and who would have a last laugh. Who are you? After the divine thought transformed into a body, the Miao Sangshui asked with a gloomy look, "Who are you then?" Looking at the middle-aged strong man in front of him, the young man in green frowned and questioned him. "I am the Miao Sangshui, the owner of this cave mansion." Although the young man in green in front of him was only a quasi-martial honorable who had completed the law completion stage, for some reason, the Miao Sangshui felt a fatal danger from him. Therefore, he suppressed the anger in his heart and explained, "I understand now." Hearing that the Miao Sangshui was the real owner of this cave mansion, the young man in green suddenly had a look of realization on his face. It seems like he used a special secret method to enter a state of suspended animation. Then, you used this opportunity to hide until the heavenly rules were restored and then find a perfect physical body to be reborn. While explaining the Miao Sangshui's plan, the young man in green explained to the saber spirit in the sea of consciousness. "Saber spirit, although I've never entered this cave mansion in my past life, a good friend of mine witnessed the entire process of the cave mansion's opening with his own eyes. According to him, this cave mansion suddenly opened on its own. Many top-notch pills, Emperor Stage and Saint Stage weapons, and Earth-rank mental cultivation methods and martial skills flew out of it. My good friend's cultivation base was only average. He was severely injured when fighting for a top-notch Emperor Stage weapon. Therefore, he did not follow the other strong masters and powerhouses into the cave mansion. However, according to him, more than 100 martial emperors and martial emperors broke into the cave mansion, and none of them left after that. From the looks of it now, I'm afraid that this fellow called Miao Sangshui is purposely using the top treasures in the treasury to attract those cultivators. His goal is to seize the body so that he can continue extending his life. The tranquility pill. It seems like this old man used the tranquility pill to live for more than 10,000 years. After hearing the young man in green's explanation, the saber spirit immediately guessed the method Miao Sangshui used to enter a state of suspended animation. Seeing that the young man in green in front of him had guessed the plan he had been preparing for nearly 20,000 years, a cold light flashed in Miao Haishui's eyes. Chapter 10:15. Sorry, I drank too much at my wedding yesterday. I'll make up for it today. In the cave residence. Young man, my life's collection is in the cave residence. If you're interested and have the guts, you can come in and have a try. I'm not afraid of you. Faced with Miao Sangshui's provocation, the young man in green sneered disdainfully and stepped into the cave residence. After the self-destructing divine thought returned to his body, Miao Sangshui first looked at Yu Haoran with a gloomy face. Then, he suddenly knocked Yu Haoran out and formed a seal with his 10 fingers. After completely sealing Yu Haoran, Miao Sangshui got up and left the cultivation room. He planned to use the means he had hidden in the cave residence to deal with the young man in green who was a fatal threat to him. After Miao Sangshui left the cultivation room, Yu Haoran, who was knocked out, immediately opened his eyes. A cold light flashed in his clear eyes. Then, he wanted to use his divine thought to check what kind of sealing technique Miao Sangshui had used on him. However, he could not use his divine thought. Damn old man. Yu Haoran could not help but curse. He immediately used his consciousness to inform the second avatar hidden in the soul annihilation array to check the sealing technique that had sealed him. This is a lower Earth class soul line sealing technique. After scanning Yu Haoran's body with his divine thought, the second avatar explained, maybe Miao Sangshui was too confident and only sealed the spiritual soul in your sea of consciousness. He did not seal the 7 meridians and dantian in your body. Seeing that the second avatar was familiar with the origin of the sealing technique, Yu Haoran quickly asked, "Can you undo it?" "Yes." While responding to Yu Haoran's inquiry, the second doppelganger left the sea of consciousness and appeared in the practice room. Then, using the special method taught by Thaling, it took less than a minute to successfully remove the seal. Then, the second clone returned to the sea of consciousness and continued to hide in the soul annihilation array. Although the sealing technique had been lifted, Yu Haoran did not get up and leave the cultivation room. Instead, he directly mobilized all of his divine sense and carefully paid attention to the battle that had officially begun. 9 white flood dragons, each hundreds of meters long, roared and bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they besieged a young man who was about 25 or 26 years old. Chen Dongyun, Yu Haoran gnashed his teeth as he muttered to himself. After seeing the appearance of the young man in green, a familiar memory immediately surged into his mind. Chen Dongyun was from the Chun clan of the eastern region's Heavenly Mountain. Although the Chun family could not be compared with those families that had existed for millions of years, it was also famous in the eastern region. Its overall strength was not inferior to the powerful families of the first-class sections. Chen Dongyun was the most outstanding person in the Chun family in terms of talent and potential. At his coming-of-age ceremony at the age of 16, because of his outstanding talent and potential, he was directly selected as the successor of the patriarch. With the disparity between the two of them as great as the heavens and earth, there shouldn't have been any interactions between them. But after entering the demon god's ancient tomb, he had been captured alive by Chen Dongyun in an overbearing and unreasonable manner. Her goal was to use him as a test subject to explore the dangers of the ancient tomb. Fortunately, his luck was good. In the 3 ancient tombs of Emperor Wu's realm, there was no fatal danger. If it weren't for the fact that Chen Dongyun was hunted down by an enemy and didn't have the time to continue using him, then it would have been impossible for him to enter the core of the demon god's ancient tomb, much less obtain the chance to reincarnate and meet the tower's spirit. Now, as Yu Haoran saw Chen Dongyun, who should have died in the explosion of the demon god's tomb, not only was she alive and well, but she even knew where the cave dwelling was hidden. How could he not know that the person who obtained the mystic sovereign saber that the pagoda spirit spoke of was Chen Dongyun? When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Although Yu Haoran wanted to cut Chen Dongyun into pieces to avenge the hatred of being coerced in his previous life, he did not act rashly. This was because Miao Tsangshui had used the hidden array and spiritual vein in the cave mansion to condense the 9 flood dragons. Their strength had all reached the peak of the second tribulation quasi-venerable realm. However, when facing Chen Dongyun, whose cultivation was only at the complete realm of the law, not only did he not have the slightest advantage, but he also used the mysterious saber technique to severely injure 3 of the flood dragons. Yu Haoran knew that he was definitely not Chen Dongyun's match now. If he acted rashly, he would definitely attract the attention of the mystic royal saber in Chen Dongyun's mind. Therefore, not only did Yu Haoran not rush out, he was even more careful with his divine thought to avoid being detected by Chen Dongyun. 9 dragons flying in the sky. Miao Tsangshui, who was hiding in the array, had a gloomy expression when he saw Chen Dongyun use the mysterious saber technique of breaking water to almost cut a flood dragon in half. The 9 Jiao dragons were not illusory. He had used the 9 middle-grade level 5 spiritual veins buried under the cave, and then forcibly condensed them through the formation flag that contained the bloodline of the divine dragon. They were also living creatures with life. If the flood dragons were killed, not only would they not be able to condense again in a short period of time, but the power of the array would also be reduced. In order to prevent Chen Dongyun from killing the flood dragons and breaking the array in the end, Miao Tsangshui used the method of exhausting his divine thought to drive the 9 flood dragons to perform a joint attack to increase the power of the attack. Looking at the 9 flood dragons that were intersecting and rushing toward him, Chen Dongyun, who was originally relaxed, suddenly became serious. After taking a deep breath, he quickly faced the 9 flood dragons and directly waved the long saber dharma weapon in his hand. Water-breaking saber, accompanied by a soft shout, streaks of saber chi that emitted a mysterious aura directly crossed the distance of space and slashed the flood dragons directly. Each streak of saber chi would directly take away a large piece of the flood dragon's flesh. However, as the 9 flood dragons were attacking in an intersecting manner, they could share the attack and damage of the saber chi. In the end, the 9 flood dragons that did not lose much strength rushed in front of Chun Dongyan like a wave. Not only did they interrupt the performance of the mysterious saber martial technique, but the 9 consecutive strong attacks also forced him to retreat. When the last flood dragon's attack ended, Chun Dongyan not only looked very embarrassed, but also spat out a few mouthfuls of blood, which completely dyed the front of his green robe in red. More importantly, the aura of the complete law had directly dropped to the peak of the 9th grade martial saint realm. "You forced me to do this." Reaching out to wipe the remaining blood at the corner of his mouth, Chun Dongyan stared at a corner of the erased space and said with a ferocious expression. Then, an unimaginably fierce aura quickly rose from Chun Dongyan's body. Accompanied by the rise of the fierce aura, an ancient aura that seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life made Chun Dongyan seem to be a different person. Yu Haoran knew that this was the possession technique performed by the mystic royal saber spirit in Chun Dongyan's sea of consciousness. The mystic royal saber's spirit temporarily replaced Chun Dongyan's body. Chapter 10:16. In the cave, after the fierce aura subsided, Chun Dongyan lifted her head and looked at the spot where Miao Tsangshui was hiding. Her eyes revealed a cold glint. Seeing the cold glint in Chun Dongyan's eyes, Yu Haoran could not help but frown. This was because the cold glint gave off a cold and emotionless feeling. It was like a single eye formed by the heavenly ways rules. There was not a single trace of emotion that a living creature should have. This was completely different from the possession technique that Thaling had used. The aura has increased by almost 100 times. The aura has been settled for at least 10 million years. It seems that the person who gives me the feeling of a fatal threat is not this young man in front of me, but a powerful spirit hidden in his mind. Although Chun Dongyan's physical body had been controlled by the saber spirit, both her aura and strength had increased by at least 100-fold. Miao Tsangshui, who was hidden in the array formation, didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, he took out 9 very unique elixirs from his storage ring. Rising Dragon Elixirs, and they are rank 3, first grade Rising Dragon Elixirs. Yu Haoran, who was also hidden in the formation, saw the 9 unique elixirs that Miao Tsangshui took out. His real body, who was in the cultivation room, almost screamed out loud. The Rising Dragon Elixir was a type of elixir that was specially made for exotic beasts with the Divine Dragon's bloodline. The Rising Dragon Elixir could not only increase the purity of the Divine Dragon's bloodline in the exotic beast's body, but could also allow the exotic beast to temporarily transform into a Divine Dragon by relying on the Divine Dragon's blood essence in its bloodline. Although the transformed Divine Dragon could only unleash 1,000th of the Divine Dragon's strength, the Divine Dragon was an almighty who had entered the realm of Emperor Wu. 1,000th of the Divine Dragon's strength was enough to allow the 9 dragons to possess strength that was infinitely close to the realm of a martial venerable. He looked at the 9 Rising Dragon Elixirs reluctantly, then looked up at Chun Dongyan, whose aura had increased by 100 times. Finally, he looked at the cultivation room. In the end, the reluctance in Miao Tsangshui's eyes was replaced by determination. He then threw the 9 Rising Dragon pills to the 9 dragons. Although the 9 dragons were formed from the condensation of the spirit vein and did not have their own consciousness, as spirit veins that were inextricably linked to the dragon tribe, they had an instinctive desire for the Rising Dragon Elixir that could enhance the bloodline of the Divine Dragon. Without needing Miao Tsangshui's instructions, the 9 scarred flood dragons roared as they charged at the Rising Dragon pill that was thrown over. Then they opened their bloody mouths and swallowed the Rising Dragon pill. This is the Rising Dragon pill that can transform into a Divine Dragon. Chun Dongsheng, who had been replaced by the saber spirit, cried out hoarsely, his expression changing drastically as he sensed the familiar medicinal fragrance and the 9 flood dragons undergoing a metamorphosis. Then, he immediately swung the saber in his saber, trying to interrupt the transformation process of the Jiao dragon. Unfortunately, Miao Cangshui used the power of the formation to speed up the absorption of the rising dragon elixir's medicinal effects by the 9 flood dragons. In the end, the transformation was completed before the saber chi attacked. The reason why the divine dragon was able to become one of the 9 great divine beast kings in ancient times was not only because of their powerful abilities, but also because of their unparalleled defense. In the face of the sharp saber chi attack, the 9 flood dragons that had completed their divine dragon transformation did not have any intention of dodging. They allowed the saber chi to strike their bodies. In the end, although they were thrown back more than 10 meters, the flood dragons that were attacked were not hurt at all. Dongyun, the flood dragons that have completed their divine dragon transformation with the help of the rising dragon elixir, are almost at the level of a martial venerable. If you want to defeat them, you'll have to use a special secret technique, so you'll have to overdraw a part of your life force. The saber spirit reminded Qin Dongyun in a serious tone as he looked at the 9 flood dragons that had completed their transformation. Saber spirit, if we can't do anything about it, let's leave the cave immediately. Faced with the saber spirit's reminder, Qin Dongyun was obviously unwilling to overdraw his life force. Or rather, he was a little wary of the saber spirit. Anyway, based on the memories of my past life, I know many grotto heavens that are not inferior to the cave before us. Dongyun, if the flood dragons had not transformed into divine dragons, I would be able to break through the defense of the formation and leave the cave directly with the strength that I'm using right now with the help of your physical body. In the face of Qin Dongyun's rejection, a trace of displeasure flashed across the saber spirit's eyes. He then continued to remind Qin Dongyun in a helpless tone. However, the only way now is to overdraw your life force and successfully kill the 9 transformed divine dragons. Only then can you completely break through the defense formation and leave the cave unscathed. Saber Spirit, how many years of life force do I need to overdraw? Qin Dongyun asked, still wary. At least 50 years. Although he wanted to say 100 years, the Saber Spirit knew that Qin Dongyun would definitely not agree. Therefore, he directly reduced the number by half, hoping to persuade him. 20 years. I can only afford to overdraw on 20 years of life force at most. Although overdrawing on 50 years of life force was within Qin Dongyun's acceptable range, he had experienced a situation like this more than once. He also knew the reason why the Saber Spirit was greedy for life force. Therefore, he immediately bargained to reduce the number of years of overdrawing. 30 years. At least overdraw on 30 years of life force. Otherwise, I don't have full confidence that I can kill the 9 divine dragons and bring you out of the cave successfully. The Saber Spirit, who also understood Qin Dongyun's character, immediately raised the price as a threat. All right. Hearing the Saber Spirit's threat, Qin Dongyun finally chose to agree. As he had comprehended the laws of life and death, Yu Haoran was very sensitive to the aura of life and death. Just as Qin Dongyun's aura suddenly began to increase, he knew that this was a method of using overdrawing on one's life force to increase one's strength. However, this method made him frown involuntarily. Before Thowing fell into a deep slumber, he had used the possession technique countless times. However, no matter how difficult the situation was, Thowing not only did not overdraw on his life force, but he also did not even overdraw on the potential that would affect his foundation. This was because Thowing had once explained to him in detail that the overdrawing of one's life force and potential in the process of using the possession technique was an irreversible loss. It could not be repaired or made up for by increasing one's cultivation level. In that case, why would the Saber Spirit, who clearly knew that overdrawing on one's life force would definitely affect Qin Dongyun's climb to the peak of martial arts in the future, still do this? Could it be that their relationship was not as close as his relationship with Thowing? Miao Cangshui, who had also sensed that his opponent's aura was rapidly increasing, immediately changed his expression. At the same time, He immediately controlled the 9 transformed WIRMs through the formation and continued to use the combined strangulation technique to take the lead in attacking Chen Dongyun, whose aura was continuously increasing. 9 dragons soaring sky, saber drawing, and soul severing. Just as the 9 WIRMs rushed toward Chen Dongyun, the saber spirit had just completed the process of exchanging one's life force for strength. He then quickly used his saber technique. Chapter 10:17. In the cave abode. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening roar, the incomparably powerful saber chi blasted away every single flood dragon that was charging over. However, the dragons, whose defensive powers had been increased by at least 100 times, did not suffer any serious injuries, even though they were blasted away by the saber chi. After regaining their balance, the dragons that had been blasted away continued to charge towards Chen Dongyun with thunderous roars. Saber spirit, is this the result of my 30 years of life force? Chen Dongyun was extremely upset when she saw that the saber spirit, whose powers had been increased by 10 times, could not gain the upper hand in the face of the 9 dragons' attacks. Don't worry. After comforting Chen Dongyun, the saber spirit quickly rose into the air and slowly closed his eyes. Cut them in half. When the saber spirit opened his eyes again, his originally cold expression had become even colder. The soft roar that came from his mouth made Yu Haoran feel that the world was heartless and treated all living things as dogs. An ordinary saber chi slowly slashed the body of one of the dragons. The dragon, which had been able to ignore the saber chi attack with its strong defense, was directly cut in half. The saber chi, which had cut one of the dragons, went on to the second dragon without any loss of power. In the end, it was also cut in half. In the end, the saber chi formed by the saber technique, cutting into 2 saber technique, completely disappeared after severing 5 dragons. Puff! Just as the saber chi cut the dragon's body in half, Miao Sangshui, who was hiding in the array, spat out blood. How is this possible? After spitting out 5 mouthfuls of blood, Miao Sangshui's face turned pale and his aura dropped to the level of a tribulation quasi-martial honorable. He was in disbelief as he spoke to himself. This was because Chen Dongyun's saber technique had not only broken through the powerful defense of the 5 dragons, but also killed the dragons that were cut in half. In other words, the strongest trump card he could use to deal with Chen Dongyun had basically lost its effect. Chen Dongyun could not help but frown when she saw that the peak heaven tier saber technique had only managed to kill 5 flood dragons after consuming nearly 70% of her strength. Then he took a deep breath and secretly activated a part of his life force that he had just intercepted in exchange for his peak strength. Then he killed the remaining 4 dragons. Miao Sangshui snapped out of his daze when he sensed that Chen Dongyun's aura was rising again. He immediately took a top-notch healing pill and stabilized his injuries with the help of the top-notch healing pill. He mobilized all the remaining power in the formation and channeled it all into the remaining 4 flood dragons. Then he controlled the flood dragons with his divine sense and charged at Chen Dongyun in a suicidal manner. Chen Dongyun's expression changed when she sensed that the 4 WIRM dragon's strength had increased tremendously. She was using her life force to increase her strength. She looked down at Miao Sangshui and saw the determination in his eyes. In the end, she could only grit her teeth and directly use all her life force in exchange for enough strength to defend herself. Yu Haoran, who had also discovered that Miao Sangshui was going to use the flood dragon's self-destruction to kill Chen Dongyun, could not help but change his expression. His separated divine sense immediately left the formation and quickly returned to his body. Boom! Accompanied by 4 deafening roars, Yu Haoran felt that the cultivation room, as well as the entire immortal cave, began to shake violently. When the 4 roars stopped, he did not hesitate and immediately spread out his divine sense. The self-destruction of the 4 flood dragons, who had transformed into divine dragons with the help of the rising dragon elixir, not only directly destroyed the protective formation of the cave residents, but also destroyed nearly 80% of the entire cave residents. For example, the treasury where the treasures were stored and the weapon room where the weapons were refined were all turned into ruins. This made Howard feel very distressed. After all, he was now in urgent need of high-grade weapons to upgrade the grade of the Rui Bell. However, compared to the pain of losing the high-grade weapons in the treasury, he was really disappointed that Chen Dongyun, who was under the self-destruction of the 4 flood dragons, was only seriously injured and did not immediately die. He knew that the weapon spirits of ancient weapons like Victor and Mystic Royal Saber had a lot of life-saving means. As long as he could not kill the opponent immediately, he would have the ability to fight back and escape. Therefore, although Howard was very disappointed, he did not continue to pay too much attention to it. He immediately sent his divine sense to Miao Sangshui. As Miao Sangshui, who was closely connected with the formation, in the instant that the formation had been destroyed by the self-detonation of the Flood Dragon, her mind had instantly suffered an unimaginable blow as her aura had directly fallen to the peak of the 9th level of the Martial Saint realm. Regarding this, Howard could not help but feel secretly happy. After the roaring sound of the self-destruction completely stopped, Miao Sangshui, who was seriously injured, first took a look at the cultivation room. He could not help but feel relieved when he found that the cultivation room was not affected by the Flood Dragon's self-destruction. Then, he directly took out a blood-red elixir and used it to overdraw all the potential of his body in exchange for the strength of a quasi-martial venerable. He planned to directly kill Chen Dongyun, who was seriously injured. "Old man, when I completely recover, I will definitely pull out your tendons and peel off your skin to avenge today's hatred." After feeling that Miao Sangshui used the elixir to stimulate all the potential of his body in exchange for the strength of a quasi-martial venerable, Chen Dongyun, who had regained control of her body, did not have the slightest intention of fighting back. After stabilizing her injuries with the help of the top-grade healing elixir, she immediately fled to the entrance of the cave and swore a bloody revenge in the future. Regarding this, Miao Sangshui only sneered. He did not take Chen Dongyun's threat to heart, nor did he plan to chase after her. Seeing that Miao Sangshui did not chase after Chen Dongyun, Howard knew that he had been thinking about taking over his body all this time. He immediately withdrew his mind. In less than 3 seconds after his mind returned to his body, Miao Sangshui, whose aura had fallen to the peak of the 7th grade martial saint, returned to the cultivation room. After seeing Howard lying peacefully on the ground, Miao Sangshui let out a long sigh of relief. Then, he bent over and helped Howard up. Then, he sat cross-legged with his palms facing up in a cultivation posture. Then, he also sat cross-legged opposite Howard and slowly closed his eyes. "Brother Rand, the old man is here." After reminding the second doppelganger hidden in the soul extermination formation, Howard directly entered Victor's body with his consciousness. Then, he used the secret technique taught by Thaling to completely hide the Victor. "You really have the potential of a top-grade genius." After entering Howard's mind with his soul, Miao Sangshui could not help but praise after seeing the boundless mind. Chapter 10:18. Inside the cave, in the sea of consciousness. Could this be the legendary perfect divine soul? It took almost a minute for the Miao Sangshui to regain his senses. Then he separated a part of his consciousness and sent it into his dantian. It really is the perfect dantian. After seeing the lake-like dantian in Howard's abdomen, Miao Haishui was pleasantly surprised. Rumor has it that the 9 stages of each realm are not the limit of cultivation. In fact, there is a hidden complete 10th-stage realm. Rumor has it that if one can reach the complete 10th-stage realm in each realm, not only will he have a perfect dantian and perfect spirit, he will also have a 30% chance of reaching the true God realm in the future. True God realm. After hearing the Miao Sangshui's excited words, Howard, who was hidden in the Victor, repeated the words with a trace of doubt in his eyes. The 10th-stage realm and 9th-stage realm have been passed down since ancient times. The lowest was martial disciple, and the highest was martial god. Could it be that the true god realm was the realm after the martial god realm? However, the Miao Sangshui did not give him much time to think. He quickly rushed to the spirit in the center of a sea of consciousness and shouted softly, "Soul refining and soul crushing technique." The soul refining and soul crushing technique was ranked 6th among the top 10 secret techniques of the Devil Dao. It was a cruel secret technique that refined and absorbed the essence of the opponent's spirit to increase the strength of a user's spirit. It was also a forbidden technique that was strictly forbidden in the Tianxin continent. Brother Rand, do it. Yu Haoran knew that the Miao Sangshui would not keep his promise. As he rushed out of the victor, he reminded the second doppelganger hidden in the formation. Just as the Yin fire formed by the soul refining and soul crushing technique was about to land on Yu Haoran's spirit, a dense Xian royal aura immediately appeared around the spirit. "Brat, how dare you trick me?" When he sensed the profound Emperor Qi corroding his soul, how could Miao Sangshui not understand that he'd fallen into Yu Haoran's trap? Miao Haishui quickly dispersed the Yin flame formed by the soul refining and soul shattering technique. He retreated quickly while shouting angrily, "Old bastard, you want to take over my body and refine my soul? If I don't scheme against you, who else can I scheme against?" Yu Haoran, who had rushed to the front of the formation, provoked Miao Sangshui with his words while waiting for his consciousness to return to his body. When he heard Yu Haoran's counterattack from outside the formation, the Miao Sangshui became even more furious as he threatened, "Brat, just you wait. When I get out, I will definitely extract the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls from your soul and expose you to the scorching sun for 7 days. I will let you know the price of tricking me. Old fart, you've fallen into the trap that yours truly has set up in advance, and you still want to escape? Aren't you being a little too delusional?" When Miao Sangshui's soul aura had been weakened by the profound monarch Qi to the peak of the 3rd-grade martial saint, Yu Haoran continued to provoke him with words as he charged into the formation and rapidly merged with his soul body. When his consciousness returned to his body, he stood up and stretched his limbs. Then, he used the secret technique of the soul refining technique to attack Miao Sangshui with the Xian royal aura to increase the power of his attack. "Brat, if you remove the formation now, I will immediately leave your sea of consciousness, and I promise that I will not covet your body anymore." With the help of Yu Haoran's secret technique of the soul refining technique, the injuries on Miao Sangshui's body became more and more serious. The spirit's aura showed a trend of plummeting. Soon, it would fall to the martial saint realm. At this moment, Miao Sangshui knew that Yu Haoran not only wanted to protect his body, but also wanted to kill him. He could not help but panic, especially when his spirit's aura fell to the peak of the 1st-grade martial saint realm. He began to tremble in fear. Yu Haoran ignored him and continued to use the secret technique of the soul refining technique to attack Miao Sangshui's spirit with the Xian royal aura. He wanted to weaken Miao Sangshui's strength to the martial ancestor realm as soon as possible so that he could use the soul-searching technique to track down the secret technique of the nihility pill condensation technique. "Young hero, this old man was wrong. I beg you to let this old man live." When Miao Sangshui's spirit's aura fell to the martial emperor realm, he was really afraid. He was afraid that the spirit that he had cultivated for thousands of years would be completely destroyed. He was afraid that the plan that he had prepared for almost 20,000 years would fail completely. Therefore, he could not help but beg bitterly. Yu Haoran still did not pay any attention to this. The more his cultivation was damaged, the faster his spirit's aura fell. In just 5 seconds, Miao Sangshui's spirit's aura had fallen to the martial king realm. At this moment, Miao Sangshui was not only afraid, but he was also filled with endless fear. He was afraid that he might lose everything. After all, before he used the Nirvana pill to enter a state of suspended animation, he was not only the most powerful person with the greatest talent and potential in that era, but he was also known as an all-rounder that was hard to come by in tens of thousands of years. More importantly, even if the Heavenly Tao's rules were not complete, and martial artists were restricted from breaking through to the martial Venerable Realm and the Emperor Wu Realm, he still had the potential to break through to the martial Venerable Realm and the Emperor Wu Realm. Therefore, he could not afford to lose everything that he had. As his spirit's aura became weaker and weaker, he finally knelt down and continued to beg with tears in his eyes. However, in the face of Yu Haoran's indifference, it did not matter if he was just pretending or begging sincerely. When his spirit's aura fell to the martial ancestor realm, Miao Tsangxue immediately stood up and threatened with a crazy look in his eyes. "Kid, since you don't want me to live, I'll drag you to hell with me." Miao Tsangxue charged toward Yu Haoran's spirit body in the center of his consciousness and began to burn his own spirit. He planned to use the self-destruction of his spirit to severely injure or even destroy Yu Haoran's spirit body. Brother Ran, do it! Just as Miao Tsangxue was about to self-destruct and die together with him, Yu Haoran immediately ordered the second clone that was hiding behind Miao Tsangxue. "Seal the spirit and break the meridians." The second clone appeared behind Miao Tsangxue in a flash and immediately performed the sealing technique. After successfully extinguishing the burning spirit, it also completely sealed Miao Tsangxue's consciousness in the spirit. He heaved a sigh of relief and removed the soul annihilation formation. The second clone immediately retreated a few hundred meters and sat down cross-legged to continue comprehending the compound formation left by Thaling. Seeing that the second clone had successfully sealed Miao Tsangxue's spirit body, Yu Haoran also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He then reached out his hand and sucked in Miao Tsangxue's spirit body. The spirit body quickly floated in front of him. He took a deep breath and pressed his left hand directly on Miao Tsangxue's head. Then, he performed the soul-searching secret technique and began to search through Miao Tsangxue's memories. Chapter 1019. Inside the cave, in his mind, based on the rumors from his previous life and his own guesses, he had always thought that Miao Tsangxue was an expert who had reached the level of Pill Emperor in Pill Dao. However, the truth was far beyond his imagination. This was because Miao Tsangxue was an all-rounder. Not only did he possess unparalleled and shocking talent in the Tao of Pills, but his talent and accomplishments in the Tao of Formations were not inferior to the Tao of Pills at all. He had also attained the formation Tao Emperor Realm. At the same time, apart from Pill Tao and Array Tao, he was also an arcane master who was proficient in innate fortune-telling. Moreover, his skill in Formula Tao had reached the peak of Pill Emperor. It was also because of his astounding achievement in innate fortune-telling that he knew the changes in the world in the future. He knew that if he wanted to see through the secrets of life and death and reach the level of martial god, he would have to wait for 20,000 years, when the laws of heaven were gradually perfected. Therefore, after he tried his best to eliminate all traces of himself in the world, he relied on the Nirvana pill that he refined himself to avoid the limitations of the passage of time on his lifespan and successfully lived to this day, nearly 20,000 years later. Apart from Miao Tsangxue's achievements that surprised Yu Haoran, what truly shocked him was that he actually saw himself in Miao Tsangxue's memories. He saw himself reaching the mountain peak and then quietly entering the cave. The only difference was that Xin Hokong was not present in the memories. This meant that Miao Tsangxue had not only predicted the situation 20,000 years later, but also accurately calculated the opportunity that belonged to him. However, whether this opportunity was a blessing or a curse was not something that he could predict in advance. He opened his eyes and closed them again. He felt that his thoughts were in a mess, especially when he thought of the three martial saints of the Jian clan, the various methods they used in the Star Tomb in his previous life, and the fact that Chen Dongyun was also reincarnated. He vaguely felt that there was a conspiracy going on. Moreover, The conspiracy against him seemed to be related to the laws of heaven. Brother, are you all right? The second doppelganger, who was comprehending the compound array, sensed the drastic change in Yu Howren's emotions and couldn't help but frown. Then, he remembered Thalink's instructions before falling asleep. He could only stand up and ask Yu Howren with concern. Brother Ran, I'm fine. The second doppelganger's concern quickly calmed Yu Howren down from his panic state. He then smiled and gestured to the second doppelganger. Just as Thalink said, no matter how hidden the other party's schemes were, as long as his cultivation level grew higher, he would become stronger. Then, by relying on his valiant strength, he would be able to deal with whatever came his way and calmly face any schemes that were aimed at him. That's great. When the second doppelganger heard that Miao Tsangshui was actually an emperor in the cultivation of array formations, he was pleasantly surprised. He then immediately checked the memories recorded in the jade slip. Yu Howren didn't disturb the second doppelganger. Instead, he stood up and carried Miao Tsangshui's soul body back to the training room. Yu Howren looked at Miao Tsangshui's body, which had been completely crippled due to the overdraft of the medicinal pills. He directly fused Miao Tsangshui's soul into the body and then undid a portion of the seal. Boy, how dare you use the soul-searching secret technique on me? After unlocking part of the seal, Miao Tsangshui gradually woke up. He immediately felt a sharp pain in his soul and immediately guessed what Yu Howren had done to him. He immediately shouted angrily, "Old man, since you're already a captive, you should be prepared to be a captive." Yu Howren reached out and tapped several key acupoints on Miao Tsangshui's body to make him feel the sharp pain in his body and soul at the same time. Yu Howren warned him coldly as he took off the storage ring on his finger. "Boy, how dare you!" When Miao Tsangshui saw Yu Howren remove the storage ring from his finger, he forcefully endured the double pain from his body and soul and continued to berate Yu Howren with a fierce expression. A cold light flashed in Yu Howren's eyes. Then he reached out and tapped several key acupoints. The unbearable pain made Miao Tsangshui howl uncontrollably. However, the overwhelming resentment in his heart made him unwilling to give in to Yu Howren. Yu Howren shrugged and ignored the Miao Tsangshui's howl. He used his divine thought to erase the Miao Tsangshui's consciousness from the storage ring. Then he entered the storage ring with his divine thought. Although he already knew from Miao Tsangshui's memories that his entire life's collection was stored in his storage ring, when he clearly saw the space within the storage ring and a mountain of spirit stones, medicinal pills, spirit herbs, magic tools, and other treasures, he instantly felt an irrepressible joy in his heart. Especially when he saw the 3 spiritual meridians of upper level 5, which were sealed by spells, among the piles of spiritual stones. He was ecstatic. He felt that his little heart was about to jump out of his chest. However, the main target of the storage ring was not the spiritual meridians, celestial weapons, or the elixirs. It was the elixir condensation technique that allowed him to refine elixirs at any time and place without the help of any external objects. Finally, he found the secret method of the elixir condensation technique in a pile of jade slips that recorded mental cultivation methods and martial arts techniques. After he wrapped the jade slip with his divine thought and left the storage ring, he immediately heard Miao Tsangshui begging for mercy. "Boy, the storage ring is for you. Ask whatever you want to know. Now, stop the acupoint sealing technique." Playing with the jade slip that recorded the elixir condensation technique, Yu Howren jokingly said, "Old man, I see that your mind is very clear now, and you speak quite well. I think you can continue to enjoy the pain caused by the acupoint sealing technique." Boy, this old man swears by the heavenly Tao that as long as you stop the acupoint sealing technique, no matter what the question is, this old man will tell you in full detail. The double pain caused by the physical body and the divine soul completely defeated Miao Tsangshui's tolerance. In order to make Yu Howren stop the pain caused by the acupoint sealing technique, he took the initiative to swear by the heavenly Tao. "If I violate the oath, this old man's divine soul will be destroyed, and I will never be reincarnated." You know your place. After hearing Miao Sangshui swear by the heavenly Tao, Yu Haoran sneered contemptuously and then stopped the acupoint sealing technique's torture on Miao Sangshui. Chapter 10:20. In the cultivation room in the cave abode. The reason why Yu Haoran interrogated the Miao Sangshui about the origin of the pill condensation technique was that when he was searching his memories, he discovered that part of his life experience was sealed. The origin of the pill condensation technique was one of them. This was also the main reason why he didn't kill the Miao Sangshui's soul directly. Hearing that Yu Haoran also knew about the pill condensation technique, the Miao Sangshui was shocked. Then, he calmed down and replied, I got it from a relic left behind from the Middle Ages. Is that so? Yu Haoran couldn't help but sneer when he heard the Miao Sangshui's explanation. Of course, the Miao Sangshui nodded immediately. However, in less than 3 seconds, a purple thunderbolt suddenly appeared in the cultivation room and went straight to the Miao Sangshui's forehead. It was obvious that it wanted to kill his soul. No, I'm telling you the truth. Seeing the purple thunderbolt that appeared out of nowhere, the Miao Sangshui immediately thought of the oath that he made under the rules of heaven. He quickly begged Yu Haoran, disappear. Yu Haoran tried to order the purple thunderbolt that appeared out of nowhere. It seemed to have its own consciousness. After hearing Yu Haoran's order, the purple thunderbolt disappeared. This shocked the Miao Sangshui. At the same time, a cold light flashed in Yu Haoran's eyes. Say it. Yu Haoran forced himself to suppress the thought that just emerged in his mind and said indifferently, I got in my dream. The Miao Sangshui said respectfully and truthfully. Be more detailed. Yu Haoran raised his eyebrows slightly and ordered. It was when my alchemy cultivation had just broken through to the Grandmaster realm. I don't know if there was a sudden mistake in the process or if there was a problem with the cultivation method, but I inexplicably entered the dream. In the face of Yu Haoran's order, the Miao Sangshui didn't dare to hide anything and explained in detail. In the dream, I saw 3 jade slips. These 3 jade slips recorded the pill condensation technique, Fushi's 8 trigrams, and the incomplete heavenly cycle star formation. It was with these 3 secret techniques that I was able to break through to the Emperor realm in alchemy, array, and formula Tao. The Miao Sangshui's explanation made Yu Haoran idea that was hard to suppress emerged. At this moment, he vaguely guessed that the mastermind behind his reincarnation was probably related to the rules. But why would the heavenly Tao, which didn't have any emotional influence, protect him like this? Miao Sangshui, I once saw scenes of myself from your memories. Could it be that you didn't think of taking precautions against me beforehand? For the sake of further investigating the reason why the laws of the heaven Tao protected him at all times, Yu Haoran continued to pursue the matter. Impossible. In the face of Yu Haoran's questioning, the Miao Sangshui immediately shook his head and denied it. Although the Tao of sorcery is the highest among the 3 auxiliary Tao of martial cultivation, reaching the peak of the Great Emperor realm, I can only calculate the situation of the world 20,000 years from now. I can't calculate the situation of a single person or a single event. Unless my formula Tao can break through to the God realm. The Miao Sangshui's denial made Yu Haoran even more certain that the mastermind was behind this. At the same time, he secretly made a plan for himself. That was to draw the heavenly Tao's interference as much as possible in the future, and then use that to deduce the reason why it protected him. After solving the doubts in his heart, there was no point in keeping the Miao Sangshui alive. Therefore, Yu Haoran flicked out a powerful wave of elemental energy and directly destroyed his soul. Then his consciousness entered the space of the storage ring again and found the Fushi 8 trigrams diagram and the incomplete heavenly cycle star formation. First, he handed the incomplete heavenly cycle star formation to the second clone in his sea of consciousness, so that it could use the heavenly cycle star formation and the composite formation left behind by the Thaling to improve its array skills. Then, He looked at the jade slip that recorded the Fushi 8 trigrams diagram in his hand and fell into a dilemma for a moment. Back then, when he used the heaven-defying technique of one chi into 3 pure ones to successfully create 2 clones, he had already formulated a plan. The first clone would specialize in alchemy, the second in array skills, and he himself would focus on martial arts. However, through the innate divination technique of the Miao Sangshui, he was able to deduce the situation of the world 20,000 years in the future. This made him very interested in the Fushi 8 trigrams diagram. The innate divination technique could not only predict the past and present lives of others, but also be able to seek luck and avoid disaster. It was definitely the best auxiliary cultivation method to save one's life. Moreover, the innate divination technique could predict the whereabouts of the opponent and make it easier to set up an ambush in advance to deal with the troublesome enemies of his previous life. However, he did not know if he had talent in Formula Dao, and he was also worried that cultivating spells would affect his martial arts cultivation. Young master, just as Yu Haoran was wondering if he should cultivate the Fushi 8 trigrams diagram, Shin Hokong's voice suddenly rang in his ears. Elder Shun, are you all right? Yu Haoran hurriedly asked out of concern as he temporarily put away the jade scroll of the Fushi 8 trigrams diagram that made it difficult for him to make a decision. He was so focused on killing the Miao Sangshui and the sudden appearance of Chun Dongyun that he forgot about Shin Hokong's existence for a moment. It was not until he heard his voice that Yu Haoran remembered the self-destruction of the 4 Jiao dragons with the help of the Rising Dragon Elixir. He did not know if the destructive force of the Jiao dragon's self-destruction had harmed Shin Hokong. Fortunately, judging from his aura, he did not seem to have any problems. Young master, I'm fine. Shin Hokong shook his head and glanced at the corpse of the Miao Sangshui. Then, he sat cross-legged in front of Yu Haoran and explained. When the 4 Jiao dragons self-destructed, I left the cave in advance, so I was not affected by the destructive force of the Jiao dragon's self-destruction. That's good. Yu Haoran nodded and said with relief. Young master, do you have time now? Shin Hokong did not care about whether Yu Haoran was safe or not, nor did he ask about the origin of the corpse that suddenly appeared next to him. He looked straight into his eyes and asked. Taking a deep breath, he forcibly suppressed all the thoughts that just emerged in his mind, and then concentrated on a showdown with Shin Haoran. If Shin Hokong could confess everything without reservation, then not only would he help him solve the doubts in his heart, but he would also teach him the way to activate the demon-subduing physique. If Shin Hokong still chose to hide and refused to confess, then he would take the initiative to remove the restrictions of the heavenly law for him. Then, they would part ways and be strangers from now on. Elder Shun, what happened during this period of time involves some of my own secrets. Looking up at Shin Haoran, Yu Haoran solemnly reminded him. Chapter 10:21. Inside the cultivation room of the cave. Young master, I'm actually not a loose cultivator. I'm from the Shun clan of the central region. Yu Haoran went straight to the point and expressed his honesty. Shin Hokong knew that Yu Haoran had already guessed that he wasn't a loose cultivator. Fortunately, he had already decided to be honest with Yu Haoran, so he didn't hesitate and started to explain his background in detail. The Shun clan is one of the most ancient clans in the Tianxin continent. We have the bloodline of the heavenly leopard from ancient times. Following Shin Hokong's detailed narration, Yu Haoran's gaze towards him revealed a trace of admiration and pity, and the vigilance and wariness he originally had towards him gradually disappeared. Shin Hokong was the 3rd son of the previous clan leader of the Shun clan. At the same time, he was also the most outstanding disciple in terms of talent, potential, perseverance, and comprehension. However, as a clan that had inherited the bloodline of ancient divine beasts, although the potential for cultivation was important, what they really valued was the purity of their ancestral bloodline. But for some reason, although Shin Hokong's potential was the strongest in the younger generation of the clan, The purity of the ancestral bloodline in his body couldn't even be compared to an ordinary clansman. Although his potential was outstanding, his talent was at the level of a top genius, and he was also the clan leader's son. He didn't receive any attention in the clan. If it was just that, the indifferent Shin Hokong wouldn't have cared. However, his outstanding potential for cultivation allowed him to display a bloodline that was much purer than the descendants of the clan's ancestors. This caused him to suffer a lot of jealousy and suppression. If it was only the suppression of ordinary descendants, his forbearing character would have allowed him to accept it. However, among these people who suppressed him, there was also his half-brother who had the same father but a different mother. Since he didn't want to make things difficult for his father and didn't want an unpredictable tragedy to happen in the future, Shin Hokong chose to leave the clan and cultivate alone as a loose cultivator. Elder Shun, have you ever thought of returning to the Shun clan? Yu Haoran probed. Although Shin Hokong had only briefly explained why he was leaving the family, Yu Haoran could tell from his tone and the tenderness that flashed through his eyes from time to time that he was still deeply reluctant to part with the family. If he still held onto the idea of returning to the Shun clan, then the most he could do was to explain the doubts that had accumulated in his heart during this period of time, and then preserve the method to activate the demon subduing physique. After all, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't come into conflict with the Shun clan in the future, and he didn't want to nurture a terrifying opponent. Young master, in the future, I will definitely return to the Shun clan. However, it is not because I am reluctant to part with the clan's power, and it is also not because of the so-called father-son relationship or brotherhood. As if he didn't hear Yu Haoran's probing just now, Shin Hokong's eyes revealed a trace of tenderness as he explained. It's for my twin sister, who was born at the same time as me. Elder Shun, could it be that your sister hasn't contacted you in all these years? Yu Haoran asked with some doubt. To be able to live in the Shun clan for so long, it meant that the purity of the ancestral bloodline in his sister's body was still not bad. Then, in these tens of years, when Shin Hokong suffered from the backlash of his heart's demon, could it be that his sister hadn't contacted him? Yu Haoran didn't believe this at all. After all, as the inheritor of the ancient divine beast Heavenly Leopard's bloodline, there must be a special method of communication, unless Shun Haoran took the initiative to cut off all contact. Faced with Yu Haoran's questioning, Shin Hokong suddenly became silent. After a full 10 minutes of silence, he raised his head to look at Yu Haoran and asked, Young master, do you still remember that time in the Heavenly Earth Chamber of Commerce's Yuxiang Pavilion I asked you how to remove the ghost soul devouring poison? Of course I remember. Yu Haoran nodded. At that time, the reason why I chose to leave the Shun clan was because of my brother's jealousy and suppression. The real reason why I decided to leave was because my sister was poisoned by the ghost soul devouring poison. I planned to go out and find a way to remove the poison for her. When mentioning the ghost soul devouring poison in his sister's body, Shin Hokong's eyes were filled with deep hatred. Elder Shun, are you sure she's still alive? Yu Haoran asked with some disbelief. According to Shin Hokong's explanation, he chose to leave the Shun clan after his sister was poisoned by the ghost soul devouring poison. The span of time was over 50 years. As an expert in poison in his previous life, Yu Haoran knew that it was impossible for anyone to survive for such a long time under the corrosion of the ghost soul devouring poison. I'm very sure. Nodding heavily, Shin Hokong took out a jade pendant from his storage ring. It was a jade pendant that emitted a trace of vitality. Young master, when the direct descendant of our inherited clan is born, the clan elders will intercept a trace of vitality and integrate it into the jade pendant. Then, through this jade pendant, we can know whether the clansmen are alive or dead. Hinting Shin Hokong to hand over the jade pendant, Yu Haoran carefully felt it. After returning the jade pendant to Shun Hao, he closed his eyes and began to speculate about this strange matter, because he was very sure that it was impossible for anyone to survive for such a long time under the corrosion of the ghost soul devouring poison. Even Yun Xiang, who barely survived because of her strong maternal love, If she didn't use the ghost soul devouring poison to cultivate poison, it would be difficult for her to live past the age of 20. According to his own understanding of poison, then combined with the characteristics of the ghost soul devouring poison, an idea gradually emerged in his mind. However, whether this idea could be confirmed or not still needed to be confirmed through some details. Elder Shun, how pure is the ancestral bloodline in your sister's body? During the coming-of-age ceremony, when she underwent the clan's bloodline test, the purity of the ancestral bloodline in my sister's body was close to 40%. It can be said that she has the highest purity ancestral bloodline in the Shun clan in the past 1,000,000 years. When mentioning his sister's excellence, the hatred in Shin Hokong's eyes was instantly replaced by pride. Elder Shun, I remember you just said that the selection of the Shun clan successor is based on the purity of the ancestral bloodline. I wonder if your sister has the qualifications to become the clan leader? At the same time that Shin Hokong's answer confirmed his conjecture, Yu Haoran continued to ask. There's a certain probability, but the hope is not great. Shaking his head, Shin Hokong's tone revealed a trace of unwillingness. Although the clan has always adhered to the principle of bloodline, deep down, it still values males over females. Therefore, although the purity of the ancestral bloodline in my sister's body is clearly the highest, when the clan decided on the successor, she chose her brother, whose bloodline purity is second only to hers. Chapter 1022. In the cave house, in the practice room. Old Shun, what I'm going to say next is likely to make you enter a state of madness, but I hope you can stick to your heart and remain absolutely calm. Shin Hokong's detailed explanation just now made Yu Haoran finally confirm that his speculation was absolutely reasonable. But the result was a very cruel thing for Shin Hokong. Therefore, before telling him the real truth, Yu Haoran needs to ensure his safety. He doesn't want his most powerful helper in the future to fall into the danger of the heart demon backlash again. Young master, don't worry. This old slave has just passed the last heart tribulation of the 3 tribulations of the quasi-martial venerable realm, and my mental cultivation is the strongest. Even if the sky is falling and the earth is cracking, I can face it calmly. Shin Hokong confidently guaranteed. However, Yu Haoran was still a little uneasy about Shin Hokong's confident guarantee. In the end, he took out a spirit congealing pill that reached the 9th grade of the 4th rank from the storage ring of Miao Sangshui and let him take it in advance. The spirit congealing pill could not only effectively eliminate the heart demon, but also greatly improve the mental cultivation. Therefore, in the face of Yu Haoran's superfluous gift, Shin Hokong did not refuse. He reached out to take the spirit congealing pill and took it directly. When the effect of the spirit congealing pill began to work, Yu Haoran said with a serious expression and a painful tone, Old Shun, according to my Yu Haoran's understanding of poison and the ghost-devouring soul, I think your sister should now be in a state where her soul and body are completely separated. Why? With a slight frown, Shin Hokong asked. In order to prevent the poison of the ghost-devouring soul from eroding your sister's last trace of vitality, it is also a trap set by the elders of your family in order to lure you in and then eliminate the hidden dangers of the family. Always alert to the changes in Shin Hokong's mood, Yu Haoran directly said his speculation just now. Shin Hokong's hands, which were placed on his legs, instantly clenched tightly. His eyes gradually turned scarlet as he asked in a low voice, Is my sister dead or alive? Is there any hope of saving her? Elder Shun, when an ancient martial art practitioner breaks through to the martial arts grandmaster realm, he will use the special energy produced in his sea of consciousness to condense his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls into his divine soul. In the same way, if you use special methods, you can extract a soul or a soul from the soul. Although Shin Hokong's current mood swings were relatively large, under his own suppression and with the help of the powerful medicinal effect of the spirit congealing pill, it was temporarily in a controllable range. So Yu Haoran continued to voice his guess. If I'm not wrong, The elders of your family must have used their powerful cultivation to extract the life spirit that could maintain a thread of life. Then, they used the remaining 2 souls and 7 spirits to counteract the spirit-devouring soul's poison. The imagined rage did not happen. After hearing Yu Haoran's speculation about his sister's fate, the scarlet that emerged in Shin Hokong's eyes gradually dissipated and his clenched fists slowly loosened. Then, he calmly said to Yu Haoran, "Young master, I want to be alone. Okay, then I'll go out and see if there are any remaining treasures in the cave mansion." Nodding, Yu Haoran found an excuse to leave, then got up and walked out of the practice room. Just as Yu Haoran closed the door to the cultivation room, an incomparably terrifying and thick murderous aura almost crushed the cultivation room. Alas, facing the strong murderous aura that erupted in the practice room, Yu Haoran just shook his head and sighed. Instead of entering the practice room to comfort him, he turned and walked to one of the few teaching rooms in the entire cave mansion that had not been destroyed. Sitting cross-legged on the floor of the teaching room, Yu Haoran took out 99 middle-grade and 99 high-grade magic weapons that he had prepared in advance. Then, with his mind, he took out the Rui bell that had fused with his spirit. He intended to take this opportunity to upgrade the Rui bell to high-grade. With his mind, he controlled the Rui bell to grow bigger and used the sound of the bell to shatter the magic weapons and then devour their essence. It took nearly 4 hours for the Rui bell to successfully refine and absorb 198 middle-grade and upper-grade magic weapons of the Grandmaster realm. Using his divine thought to carefully examine the Rui bell that had advanced to high grade, Yu Haoran was pleasantly surprised to find that as the grade of the Rui bell continued to increase, not only did its attack and defense become stronger, but its quality had also increased by dozens of times. At this time, the Rui bell could be said to be the top magic weapon of high grade. Controlling the Rui bell with his mind, Yu Haoran got up and returned to the practice room. At this moment, although the strong, murderous aura in the practice room had disappeared, the door was still closed. He couldn't help but worry about Shin Hokong. He didn't know if he had accepted the reality of his sister's death. He reached out and pushed open the door to the practice room and stepped inside. When he saw Shin Hokong sitting there motionlessly, Yu Haoran couldn't help but feel his heart tremble. Shin Hokong, whose silver hair had gradually turned black as his injuries gradually recovered, now had white hair that was as white as snow. He quickly walked over to Shin Hokong. 2 streams of blood tears that had completely dried up showed that the extreme grief just now had completely damaged his internal organs. "Elder Shun, are you okay?" Yu Haoran asked cautiously. "Young master, this old servant is fine." Shin Hokong replied in a hoarse voice, his eyes still closed. "Elder Shun, your eyes." Looking at Shun Haokong, who had his eyes tightly shut, Yu Haoran suddenly had a bad feeling. As he asked, he reached out to open Shun Haokong's eyelids to see if the situation was as he had guessed. The Shun family will fall into darkness forever. But Shin Hokong reached out to stop him and said the reason why his eyes were closed. "Elder Shun, why do you have to do this?" Yu Haoran shook his head and reprimanded him with some heartache. In this regard, Shin Hokong just smiled and didn't explain too much. Sitting cross-legged in front of Shin Hokong, Yu Haoran looked at the 2 streams of blood at the corner of his eyes and sighed softly. Then he condensed some clear water with his Yuan Qi and wiped the dried blood stains, and said solemnly, "Elder Shun, I'll give you a choice now. Young master, please speak." Shin Hokong hurriedly put away the warm feeling that emerged in his heart when he was wiping away the bloodstains just now and said with a serious expression, "Elder Shun, now I can remove the restriction of the heavenly Tao on you. You can choose to leave or continue to stay by my side." Yu Haoran gave him the choice of returning his freedom. Chapter 10:23. In the cultivation room of the cave residence, Yu Haoran was deeply gratified to hear Shin Hokong's sincerity and decisiveness. He also decided to teach him the real way to activate the demon's subduing constitution. "Elder Shun, thank you for thinking highly of me, Yu Haoran." Yu Haoran asked after he got up and thanked Shun Haokong before sitting down cross-legged again. Elder Shun, do you know that you have a very special constitution? Impossible. Shin Haokong quickly shook his head and denied Yu Haoran's question. In addition to the secret method to test the ancestral bloodline, the Shun clan also has a special instrument to test special constitutions. During the coming-of-age ceremony, I was tested by the instrument. I only have an ordinary body. Elder Shun, what is the level of the instrument to test special constitutions? After more than a year of contact, Yu Haoran believed that Thaling's judgment would not be wrong. The problem must be with the instrument to test special constitutions. After all, the demon's subduing constitution was ranked 14th among thousands of special constitutions. It had the potential to become an ancient demon god. Ordinary instruments and secret methods would not be able to directly test it. Superior Sage Stage. Shin Haokong replied. No wonder. Yu Haoran was relieved to hear that the instrument to test special constitutions was only at the level of Superior Sage Stage. Then he smiled and pointed out the origin of Shin Haokong's special constitutions. Elder Shun, in fact, not only do you have a special constitution, but you also have the demon's subduing constitution, which is ranked 14th among thousands of special constitutions. Demon subduing constitution. Even Shun Haokong, who had just undergone a transformation in his state of mind and was able to remain calm in the face of death, stood up in shock when he heard that he possessed the demon subduing physique. After all, the Shun clan had some records about the thousands of special constitutions as a family with the bloodline of ancient divine beasts. Among them, there was a general introduction to the demon subduing constitution. That's right. Yu Haoran nodded and confirmed further. It is the demon subduing constitution that has the potential to become an ancient demon god. Oh, after taking 3 deep breaths, Shin Haokong barely calmed down his agitated emotions and asked with a trace of doubt on his face. Young master, if I have the demon subduing physique, then why haven't I felt anything for the past few decades? According to the clan's simple description of the demon's subduing physique, not only could it increase one's strength by tens of times, but it could also increase the speed of one's cultivation. That's because you've never truly activated the demon subduing physique. While explaining Shin Haokong's question, Yu Haoran recalled the method to activate the demon subduing physique that Thaling had left behind. Young master, how can I activate the demon subduing physique? Without activating his demon subduing physique, the speed at which he improved his cultivation had already far surpassed that of his brothers and sisters with the purest ancestral bloodline. What if he activated his demon subduing physique? As it turned out, he thought that he would need at least a few hundred years or even a few thousand years to avenge his sister. After all, he knew too well how terrifying the Shun clan's resources were. However, with the help of the demon subduing physique, the time would be reduced by at least half, or even less. Elder Shun, as a special physique that can increase one's cultivation and physical body grade, the method to activate the demon subduing physique requires. Faced with Shin Haokong's questioning, Yu Haoran explained in detail according to the records left behind by Thaling. In fact, the process of activating the demon's subduing physique was very simple. One only needed to absorb 2 types of blood essence with different characteristics. However, it was also very complicated because the 2 types of blood essence represented the divine blood and the demon blood. The divine blood and the demon blood referred to the bloodline inheritance left behind by those who had broken through to the martial god realm in the ancient, middle, and recent ancient times. The blood of those who had broken through to the martial god realm was called the divine blood. The blood of those who had broken through to the martial god realm was called the demon blood. Regardless of whether it was in his previous life or this life, he had never met a descendant with these 2 types of bloodline inheritance. This was the main reason why it was both simple and complicated. Young master, I know of at least 3 clans that possess the bloodline of the martial god. However, I'm not sure about the descendants of the demon god. After listening to Yu Haoran's detailed introduction of the demon subduing physique, Shin Hokong understood why he couldn't sense the special physique. He began to recall the origins of the god's blood and the demon's blood. Finally, he remembered the family that inherited the god's blood. Elder Shun, you don't have to worry about collecting god's blood and demon's blood. I have my own way of dealing with it. Regardless of the divine blood inheritance of the orthodox martial arts, or the demonic blood inheritance of the demonic martial arts, they must be the top existences in the Tianxian land. As the hidden dragon ranking competition that could gather the potential fortune of the entire profound sky continent, it would definitely attract the participation of all the top monstrous geniuses in these clans. When the time came, no matter what, he would have to collect enough god blood and demon blood for Shin Hokong to activate the demon subduing physique. Young master, all you need to do is point out who the target is. Leave the rest to me. Shun Haokong, who had a clear mind, was able to figure out Yu Haoran's method of collecting god blood and demon blood after some thought. Although he was very touched, he couldn't let Yu Haoran do something so risky. All right, we'll see how it goes. There was still more than 8 months before the Hidden Dragon ranking competition opened. It was still too early to discuss who would be the one to take action. Therefore, after Yu Haoran took the initiative to end the topic about the demon subduing physique, he continued to explain the doubts in his heart. Twin Ox Mountain was a mountain that looked very similar to the Green Ox. At the same time, it was also a very unique mountain. This was because the two mountain peaks were located on the border between the southern region and the central region. One mountain peak was located in the central region, while the other mountain peak was located in the southern region. Therefore, regardless of whether it was martial artists who wanted to go to the central region for training or experts who wanted to return to the southern region from the central region for business, they would all choose to rest at Twin Ox Mountain for a period of time. Moreover, there were 3 treasures on Twin Ox Mountain. The 3 treasures could increase a martial artist's cultivation and strength, attracting many martial artists. As time went by, Twin Ox Mountain gradually developed into 2 huge cities built on the mountain. They were called Left Ox City and Right Ox City, respectively. Looking up at the Right Ox City that was built halfway up the mountain, Yu Haoran had a nostalgic look in his eyes. In his previous life, the 2 cities on Twin Ox Mountain could be said to be the places where he had stayed for the longest time. There were unforgettable experiences and unforgettable enemies there. Chapter 1024. At the foot of the Twin Bull Mountain, if Elder Shun has any personal matters to attend to, you can leave first. You only need to look for me half a year later. Yu Haoran took a deep breath and dispelled the memories of his previous life. He turned his head and instructed Elder Shun. Young master, what about your safety? The central region was beyond the Twin Bull Mountain. The family that he knew had the divine blood inheritance was less than 100,000 kilometers away from the Twin Bull Mountain. With his speed and strength, a round trip would take at most half a month. Therefore, after hearing Yu Haoran's instructions, Shin Hokong was a little tempted. However, he was more worried about Yu Haoran's safety in the Twin Bull Mountain. After all, in the Twin Bull City of the Twin Bull Mountain, there were various experts and powerhouses from the central and southern region. Among them, there were peak Third Tribulation quasi-martial honorables experts, sinister villains who were good at scheming, and even elite disciples of the families who had gone out to train. Elder Shun, on the way out of the cave, you must have seen Yu Haoran's strength and methods. Can I deal with the situation in the Twin Bull Mountain? Yu Haoran asked confidently. In his previous life, when he first arrived at the Twin Bull Mountain, his cultivation was only at the peak of 7th grade martial ancestor realm. Even so, he had lived safely in the Twin Bull City for nearly 3 months. Now, he had comprehended the law of life and death, and his cultivation had reached the peak of 2nd grade martial saint realm. He was even less afraid of the dangers in the Twin Bull City. Although Yu Haoran's guarantee was full of confidence, Shin Hokong was still not at ease. Then, he took out a jade slip from his storage ring and used his divine soul, origin energy, soul energy, and the power of law to condense a life-saving jade pendant. Young master, This jade pendant contains 1/10 of my origin energy and soul energy, as well as the power of law that I have comprehended. The clone that it condenses has the strength of a second tribulation quasi-martial honorable. Shin Ho Kong explained in detail as he handed the life-saving jade pendant to Yu Haoran. If you encounter an enemy that you can't deal with, you can crush this jade pendant directly. The clone that you condense will be able to block the enemy's attack, and I, who can sense it, will rush over in time. Without further delay, Yu Haoran took the life-saving jade pendant and exhorted with concern, "Elder Shun, take care of yourself too. Young elder, this old servant will take his leave first." After bowing to Yu Haoran, Shin Ho Kong took to the air, flew over the Twin Peak Mountain, and rushed into the central region. After Shin Ho Kong left, Yu Haoran placed the life-saving jade pendant in front of his chest and started climbing the right peak of Mt. Shuangin. The Twin Oxen Mountain had 3 treasures: the Sword Gauntlet, the Sword Grass, and the Sword Rampart. The Sword Tower was located at the peak of the right mountain. It was a very unique pavilion. It was a holy place that was specially used to sharpen one's sword skills. The Sword Grass, also known as the sword-shaped grass, was a special spiritual grass that could be used to comprehend the concept of the way of the sword and increase the power of one's sword skills. It grew in a valley between 2 mountain peaks. The sword wall was located halfway up the left mountain peak. It was a stone wall with 3 huge sword marks. One could comprehend sword skills of different grades and powers by observing the sword marks. In the past, Yu Haoran did not feel much when his cultivation level was low. However, after he had broken through to the martial sage realm, he realized that he seemed to have relied too much on the staff skills left behind by the Monkey Emperor, the wizard's physique, and the dual elemental law's martial skills that he had comprehended. He had neglected the sword skills that were directly related to the way of the martial way. Moreover, in the upcoming Hidden Dragon Roll contest, he would encounter opponents of different cultivation levels, abilities, and backgrounds. If he kept using the staff skills, the wizard's physique, and the dual elemental law's martial skills, he would definitely give some powerful opponents a chance to study him. In this way, he would not be able to take advantage of his performance in the Hidden Dragon Roll contest. More importantly, when he had accepted the legacy of the Heaven Slayer Demon Honorable, he had set the goal of creating his own mental cultivation method and martial skills. Now that he had broken through to the martial sage realm, he was about to reach the end of the first half of the Great Mystery Heart Sutra. He was in a hurry to create a suitable mental cultivation method and martial skill for himself. Therefore, this was the main reason why he had come to the Twin Bull Mountain and planned to stay for half a year. This was because he wanted to use this half a year's time to create a complete set of sword skills through the cultivation and comprehension of sword skills. He wanted to lay the foundation for creating his own mental cultivation method and martial skill. The Twin Bull Mountain was less than 2,000 meters tall. Although he was only climbing on foot with his strength and leg strength, it only took him 3 minutes to reach the city gate halfway up the mountain. Unlike ordinary cities, the city gates of the 2 cities in the Twin Bull Mountain were not high. There were also no guards to interrogate or collect fees. Yu Haoran did not stop and entered the city directly. Martial artists who could travel between the 2 regions were at least martial arts grandmasters who could fly on their own. Moreover, the higher one's cultivation, the stronger one's strength, the more one would prefer a quiet environment. Therefore, the entire city was very quiet, and very few loud noises could be heard. After entering the city, Yu Haoran did not stop to look around. Based on his experience of living in the Twin Bull Mountain in his previous life, he went straight to the Heavenly Earth branch in the east of the city. "Sir, do you want to buy pills, spiritual herbs, magic weapons, or do you have any treasures to sell?" Just as Yu Haoran arrived in front of a 3-story shop, a 25-year-old shop assistant who was a 3rd-grade martial king took the initiative to ask. "Lodging." Yu Haoran replied indifferently as he followed the shop assistant into the shop. The shop assistant who led the way immediately stopped, and the smile on his face instantly disappeared. He reminded him in a serious tone, "Sir, please don't joke around. Our Heavenly Earth branch in the Twin Bull Mountain only deals with business, not inns. I know. Yu Haoran did not show the slightest dissatisfaction because of the shop assistant's change of expression. He nodded as he walked towards the counter. Shopkeeper, help me arrange a courtyard with an elegant environment. He took out a purple token with the word honorable carved on it from his storage ring and threw it on the counter as he ordered. Seeing Yu Haoran's commanding tone, like that of an elder of the Chamber of Commerce, the shop assistant standing behind him darkened his face. He reached out to grab Yu Haoran's neck and was about to throw him out of the shop. The shopkeeper standing behind the counter saw the purple token on the counter, and his expression immediately changed. He glared angrily at the shop assistant who was about to make a move, and then said with a smile, "Sir, don't worry. There is a courtyard with an elegant environment in the Chamber of Commerce's branch. I will take you there now. Thank you for your trouble." Chapter 1025. Rydok City, in the shop of Heavenly World. Looking at Yu Haoran, who was led to the backyard by the shopkeeper, the shop assistant asked himself with a puzzled expression, "How come I didn't know that there was such a young lord in the Chamber of Commerce?" Then, he suddenly thought of Yu Haoran's request and the shopkeeper's arrangement just now. His face suddenly changed, and he muttered to himself, "Oh no, I forgot to tell the shopkeeper that the sixth elder has arranged a Yuan pavilion for He Shalai, one of the successor disciples of the master of the Heaven Sword sect, a first-class sect." He turned his head and waved to a second-grade martial king in the shop, indicating that he was in charge of greeting the guests for the time being, and then rushed to the backyard. "Shopkeeper, I am very satisfied with this beautiful courtyard. When I see the first elder in the future, I will definitely put in a good word for you." Looking at the elegant courtyard with abundant spiritual chi in front of him, Yu Haoran nodded with satisfaction, and then gave an empty promise that he didn't know if it could be fulfilled in the future. "Thank you, Prince Consort." On the way to the courtyard just now, the shopkeeper had inquired about Yu Haoran's background and knew about his close relationship with the first elder. Now, after hearing Yu Haoran's promise, he immediately thanked him excitedly. After all, through the strong advertising effect formed by the auction in Guangling City and the close relationship with Yu Haoran, Heavenly World's business in the southern region suddenly opened up, and even seized many territories that originally belonged to the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion. This made the first elder's reputation in the Chamber of Commerce higher and higher, and his power more and more. If he could be appreciated by the first elder, he would be able to have a meteoric rise in the future and control more power. "Prince Consort, please." Suppressing the excitement in his heart, the shopkeeper stepped forward to open the courtyard door and gestured respectfully. "Shopkeeper." Just as Yu Haoran was about to enter the courtyard, a shop assistant hurried over and anxiously called out to the shopkeeper. "Shopkeeper, after nearly half a month of traveling, this Prince Consort is very tired and needs a good rest." Turning his head to look at the anxious-looking shop assistant, Yu Haoran considerately reminded him, "If you have something important to deal with, you can go ahead. You don't have to continue to accompany me." "I'm really sorry, Prince Consort. Then I'll take my leave first." After cupping his fists in apology, the shopkeeper turned and walked to the shop assistant, but from his gloomy face, he was in a very bad mood at this time. Waving his sleeve and closed the courtyard, Yu Haoran went straight to the practice room. Ever since he left Miao, Sangshui's abode, he brought Shun Haokong to two other danger zones to temper himself. Had and Marshall he and was on the verge was on his body was on the verge of the was of the sword of the heave of the what did you say? After hearing the shop assistant's report, the originally gloomy face of the shopkeeper became even gloomier. "Shopkeeper, I received the communication jade token from the sixth elder in the morning. You were not in the Chamber of Commerce at that time, so I did not inform you immediately." Sensing the murderous intent that was surging out of the shopkeeper's body, the shop assistant quickly explained, "When will He Shilai arrive in Rydok City?" If not for the fact that the shop assistant in front of him had been with him for more than 10 years and was his most trusted confidant, he would have slapped him to death for the trouble he had caused just now. Therefore, he could only forcefully suppress the murderous intent that was surging out of his heart and think of a way to solve the problem. Tomorrow afternoon. Sensing the disappearance of the murderous intent, the shop assistant secretly heaved a sigh of relief and quickly replied, Lin Hua, clean up Xingyun Pavilion immediately. Thinking of how Yu Haoran had said that he would trouble him for a period of time, the shopkeeper knew that he would not be leaving the Chamber of Commerce in a short period of time. He could only arrange a new place for He Shilai to stay. Shopkeeper, Xingyun Pavilion is a few grades lower than Yuan Pavilion. If you arrange for He Shilai, who is known as the Earth Sword, to stay there, will it cause dissatisfaction with the Sky Sword sect? Seeing that the shopkeeper was planning to arrange the ordinary Yun Pavilion for He Shilai, the shop assistant worriedly reminded him. Then what do you think we should do? The shopkeeper glared at the shop assistant unhappily and asked, Shopkeeper, can you discuss with that person and see if he is willing to move to Xingyun Pavilion? The shop assistant carefully suggested, Lin Hua, if you want to die, I have no objections, but I hope you don't drag me down with you. A cold light flashed in the shopkeeper's eyes. He flicked his sleeves and left, leaving behind a warning that made the shop assistant's legs tremble. With the help of elixirs and more than 10 level 4 spirit stones, he successfully broke through the bottleneck of his realm in less than 10 minutes. His cultivation and physical body simultaneously advanced to the early stage of 3rd grade martial saint. After briefly consolidating his cultivation and physical body, Yu Haoran stood up and left the cultivation room. Then he soared into the sky and flew towards the sword gauntlet at the peak of the mountain. Among the cultivation artifacts in the Tianxian continent, there were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, tridents, and dozens of other systems. However, most cultivators chose sword techniques. As a top-notch treasure that could be used to hone sword techniques, the sword gauntlet had countless swordsmen who wanted to enter it to cultivate every day. However, due to the restrictions of the space of the sword gauntlet, only 3 cultivators could enter at a time. Therefore, not only were there hundreds of people gathered in front of the sword gauntlet, but they also often fought to enter the sword gauntlet. Under the premise that there was no power to restrict them, the result of fighting was either you die or I die. Get out of the way. Yu Haoran sternly reprimanded the few martial emperors standing in front of him. In the Twin Bull Mountain, forbearance and retreat would only make you more oppressed. Only by showing your powerful strength, domineering behavior, and cruel methods could you win the respect of everyone. Only then would you be able to enter the sword gauntlet to cultivate at any time. Brat, I think you're tired of living. How dare you reprimand us? Although Yu Haoran had shown his domineering aura from the beginning, due to the disadvantage brought about by his age, not only did he not make the few martial emperors who had been reprimanded move away, he even attracted the attack of a strong man at the peak of 7th grade martial emperor. Looking at the iron fist that was rapidly approaching him, Yu Haoran sneered with disdain. He quickly opened his left palm and directly clenched the iron fist. As the palm that was clenching the iron fist began to exert force, the strong man at the peak of 7th grade martial emperor could not help but howl. Brat, let go of me. Enduring the intense pain in his heart, the strong man threatened with a ferocious expression. Chapter 1026. On the peak of Mount Ridox. A miserable cry of pain immediately attracted the attention of the people on the peak. Who is this person? Why have I never seen him before? A middle-aged warrior in the early 1st level of the martial sage realm said to himself, raising his eyebrows slightly. He's young, strong, and ruthless. It seems that he's either an elite disciple of a first-class sect or a core disciple of an inherited family. Another white-bearded old man at the peak of the 9th level of the martial sage realm praised Yu Haoran's background. He's so young, but he's so ruthless. I can tell at a glance that he's not a good person. Another young man who didn't like Yu Haoran sneered disdainfully. Are you guys stupid? Hurry up and help me. After the fist was crushed, Yu Haoran also let go of his hand. the strong 7th-level martial royal realm man, who took a few steps back, took a healing pill, and shouted at his companions. Without using any primordial force or soul power, he could directly block the iron fist with his strong physical body and crush the attack of his companions. This showed that the seemingly young man in front of him was definitely an expert at the martial sage realm. Therefore, in the face of the angry roar of the strong 7th-level martial royal realm man, none of his companions dared to step forward to help. Moreover, under Yu Haoran's indifferent gaze, they obediently made way for him with a posture of submission. "Are you still men?" Seeing that his companions took the initiative to submit to Yu Haoran, the strong 7th-level martial royal realm man suddenly flew into a rage and pointed at them. "If you don't want to die, you'd better shut up immediately." Yu Haoran walked toward the sword tower. When he approached the strong 7th-level martial royal realm man, who was still cursing, he threatened him with a frosty voice. "Boy, if you have the guts, just kill me directly. Otherwise you—" Facing Yu Haoran's frosty threat, the strong 7th-level martial royal realm man continued to threaten him recklessly. However, before he could finish his threat, a strong primordial force directly penetrated his heart. You really dared to attack me." Looking at the pierced heart, the strong 7th-level martial royal realm man, who would not die for the time, being said in disbelief. Although after a warrior broke through the martial grandmaster realm and condensed his own divine soul, he could reach the extent where his physical body was destroyed, but his divine soul could not be destroyed. Very few warriors could survive after their divine souls left their physical body. This was because the opponent would not give the divine soul a chance to make a comeback. It was also because the divine soul would die quickly after losing the energy provided by the physical body. "Brat, my big brother, the berserk black fiend, will never let you go." Just as his divine soul was about to be destroyed, the 7th-grade martial emperor left behind a threat that made everyone's expression change. With regards to this, Yu Haoran's expression did not change at all as he continued walking towards the sword tower. However, when Yu Haoran walked in front of a handsome young man who was about 30 years old with an outstanding temperament, the other party crossed his arms and looked at him with a sneer. He had no intention of making way for Yu Haoran. "Get lost." Yu Haoran looked coldly at the handsome young man and scolded him in a frosty voice. Facing Yu Haoran's frosty scolding, the handsome young man suddenly screamed and asked with a gloomy face, "Boy, do you know who I am? I'll count to 3. Yu Haoran ignored the other party's question and indifferently gave him a time limit. "I'm from the Wu clan of the Chilean mountain range in the central region." The handsome young man introduced himself arrogantly. After hearing the background of the handsome young man, there was a shocked discussion at the scene. Some warriors who came from the southern region or were too far away from the Chilean mountain range didn't know what the Wu clan behind the handsome young man represented. They hurriedly asked some warriors who knew the situation. The Wu clan has a history of more than 100,000 years. Not only is the clan powerful, but there are also 3 peerless martial revered experts among their ancestors. They're the real overlords of the Chilean mountain range. A martial sage expert who knew the Wu clan very well introduced with a shocked expression. Hearing other people's introduction of the Wu clan and seeing the shocked expressions of the surrounding people, the handsome young man smiled complacently. 3 seconds have passed. You can die now. However, what surprised the young man, or rather, what angered him was Yu Haoran's contempt for the Wu clan. Yu Haoran was so arrogant that he considered everyone beneath him. "Arrogant and ignorant boy, I'll send you on your way first." The handsome young man who took out his natal sword roared and stabbed it directly between Yu Haoran's eyebrows. An early first-grade martial saint and a high-grade martial emperor natal sword. Seeing the means displayed by the young man, Yu Haoran secretly stimulated the power of the ancestral sorcerer's fleshly body. At the same time, he directly clamped down on the sword with 2 fingers as fast as lightning. At this moment, the tip of the natal sword was less than a centimeter away from his eyebrows. What a powerful physical body! Seeing the handsome young man use his origin energy and soul power to drive the natal sword, but didn't move at all, the crowd couldn't help but sigh. Let go. As Howard looked at the elegant youth who was trying his best to drive his intrinsic sword, he roared and twisted his fingers that were clamping the sword tip. A powerful vibrational force forced the elegant youth to let go of his intrinsic sword. Howard glanced at the ordinary high-grade martial emperor sword that was suitable to improve the quality of the wish bell. He directly put the natal sword into his storage ring. Brat, hand over this young master's natal sword. His natal sword, which had been isolated from his mind by the storage space, caused the young man to yell angrily. Howard's response to this was very simple. He infused his fist with the law of speed, and before his opponent could react, his head was directly smashed into pieces. Using his origin energy to shake away the blood and brain matter that splattered over, Howard continued to walk toward the sword tower. With the strength of his fleshly body, not only could he catch a high-grade Emperor Realm artifact, he could even directly kill a first-grade martial saint expert. The domineering aura and strength that Howard had displayed when he had killed the young man earlier had directly caused all the experts below the peak of the 7th-grade martial saint to immediately make way for him. Looking at the middle-aged expert who was at the peak of the 8th-grade martial sage and had a slightly feminine temperament, Howard didn't say a word, but the coldness in his eyes made the middle-aged man hesitate. In the end, the middle-aged man sighed softly and took the initiative to move aside. Chapter 10:27. Rydok's Peak, top of the peak. Scram. Even though he was facing a peak 9th-grade martial saint, Howard's attitude and tone were still as domineering as ever. Die. The skinny old man, who also didn't like to talk nonsense, reached out with his left hand, which was as thin as a claw, towards the top of Howard's head the moment Howard scolded him. Using the law of speed, Howard quickly dodged the skinny old man's hand. He took out his purple staff and took a deep breath, overturning rivers and seas. With the power of the ancestral witch's body and the staff technique of the Monkey Emperor, the purple staff was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. It went straight for the skinny old man's head. When the skinny old man sensed the strength of a quasi-martial saint from the incoming purple rod, he knew that he had provoked a heaven-defying demon-level genius. He also knew that he was no match for Howard. Therefore, he wanted to admit defeat and admit defeat. However, the staff technique suddenly accelerated. Just as he opened his mouth to admit defeat, the purple staff heavily smashed into his head. Sizzle. A lofty expert at the peak of the 9th-grade martial saint realm had not even been able to resist a single strike of the staff technique, as he had been directly smashed into meat paste. The strength that Howard had displayed earlier immediately caused everyone present to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. His strong body could directly clamp a high-grade martial emperor artifact. As an early 3rd-grade martial saint, he could directly kill a peak 9th-grade martial saint expert. At this moment, even if Howard didn't take the initiative to introduce himself, everyone knew that he had an extraordinary background. It was very likely that he was a disciple of a family that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Since even a peak 9th-grade martial saint expert couldn't block a single staff attack from this young man, the dozen or so experts of the same cultivation level in front of the sword tower wouldn't seek their own deaths. Just as Howard's cold gaze looked over, they immediately stepped aside, allowing Howard to smoothly arrive in front of the sword tower. The sword tower stood at the top of the Rydok's Peak. It was only 9 meters tall, but it gave people the feeling that they needed to look up. The exquisite and clear tower allowed people to see that there were 81 floors in the sword tower, which corresponded to the 9th grade and 9th grade of the martial saint realm. Looking at the familiar sword tower in front of him, Howard's eyes showed a look of reminiscence. In his previous life, he had entered the sword tower 3 times. Relying on his cultivation and knowledge in the way of the sword, he finally reached the 60th floor, which was equivalent to a fourth-grade martial saint. Now, although his cultivation was much higher than his previous life, he wasn't too confident that he could pass the 60th floor. After all, after his reincarnation, he gradually lost his grasp of the essence of swordsmanship due to the neglect of his swordsmanship. Therefore, he intended to take advantage of this period of time to carefully recall the memories of the essence of sword techniques from his previous life and see how many levels of the sword tower he could reach in his first attempt. But before that, he still needed to occupy a spot to enter the sword tower. There were 4 doors at the bottom of the sword tower, which corresponded to the east, west, south, and north respectively. Among them, the east, west, and north doors were the entrances to the sword tower, while the south door was the exit. At this moment, in front of the east, west, and north doors, there were 3 experts who looked like ants sitting cross-legged. Howard knew that this was the influence of the rules. In fact, the sword tower that looked like it was only 9 meters tall was actually more than 10,000 meters tall. However, it was limited by a special rule, which caused the sword tower to shrink to a height of 9 meters. Similarly, under the influence of the rule of reducing the height of the sword tower, all the martial saints who were close to the sword tower would automatically shrink and eventually become the size of the 3 experts sitting cross-legged in front of the sword tower. Of course, this shrinking was only in the eyes of the bystanders. To the martial saints who were close to the sword tower, they didn't feel anything. Walking towards the sword tower, Howard, who was gradually shrinking under everyone's gaze, came to the east door first. This was a middle-aged expert who was about 50 years old. He was wearing a light blue sword robe and had a long breath. Just seeing the appearance of the middle-aged expert in the sword robe, Howard turned and walked towards the north door. This was because the middle-aged expert in the sword robe was called Qian Shiheo. He was a rogue martial saint who was proficient in the way of the sword. He was a peak martial saint who had reached the 3rd tribulation. With his current strength, even if he used the secret technique of overdrawing the blood of the ancestral witch, it would be difficult to defeat him. He could only give up helplessly. He walked quickly to the north door. This was a handsome young man who was less than 30 years old. He was wearing a dazzling starlight robe, which set off his extraordinary background. Even in the state where his eyes were closed and he was regulating his breath, there was still a faint smile on his face, giving people a gentle feeling that made them want to get close to him. Sighing softly and shaking his head, Howard walked towards the west door. The young man in the starlight robe who was sitting at the north door was called Lu Xing, nicknamed Lu Xing. He came from the High Heaven Pavilion, one of the 7 top sections. He was also the only disciple of the current High Heaven Pavilion Master. Although his cultivation was only at the peak of the 9th grade martial saint, his true strength was not inferior to that of a 2nd tribulation martial saint. Of course, if he used the secret technique of the ancestral witch, Howard was confident that he could take his life in 3 moves. However, in his previous life, Lu Xing had saved his life 3 times. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to take his place in the sword tower. After walking to the west door, Howard's eyes flashed with a cold light. This was because the middle-aged martial artist sitting at the west door was called Zhui Yuqing. He was a deacon from the Yushu Temple's underground palace. He was also one of the enemies who had led a team to kill him in his previous life. Get lost. Quickly walking in front of Zhui Yuqing, Howard forcefully suppressed the killing intent that was constantly surging in his body and scolded him with a frosty voice. "Brat, do you know who you were talking to?" Zhui Yuqing opened his eyes and asked with a gloomy face. "I'll count to 3. In order to avoid being found out that he was purposely targeting the Yushu Temple, Howard gave a time limit as if he was dealing with a young man from the Wu clan. "Brat, I think you are tired of living." As the head of the 7 top sects in the profound sky continent and a deacon of the Yushu Temple's underground palace, no matter where Zhui Yuqing went, he would be treated as a distinguished guest. Even in the Twin Bull Mountain that was not ruled by any power, no one dared to provoke or make things difficult for him. Otherwise, how could he, with his cultivation at the peak of the 8th grade martial saint, obtain a place to enter the sword tower. Chapter 1028. In front of the west gate of the sword tower, after a furious threat, Zhui Yuqing used his origin energy and soul power to form a giant hand, intending to crush Yu Haoran to death. After all, Yu Haoran was only 18 or 19 years old, and was not a young talent that he was familiar with. Just as Zhui Yuqing used his origin energy and soul power to form a giant hand, Yu Haoran, who was counting down his heart, suddenly took a step forward and quickly punched out. While instantly shattering the giant hand, his fist, which was not weakened in the slightest, heavily smashed onto Zhui Yuqing's head. Under Zhui Yuqing's incredulous gaze, his entire head was completely smashed into countless pieces of flesh. After using his origin energy to throw the splattered blood and brain matter, as well as Zhui Yuqing's corpse, several hundred meters away from the sword tower, Yu Haoran directly sat cross-legged in front of the west gate, quietly waiting for the sword tower to reopen. He even dared to kill a deacon of a Yushu temple. Where did this kid come from? Looking at the headless corpse that was thrown out of the sword tower, among the crowd on the mountain peak, a peak 3rd grade martial saint expert who was very familiar with the Yushu temple asked himself with a shocked expression. This person is Yu Haoran from the Southern Domain's 2nd-rate sect, the 100 Chi Gate. His master is the Clear Cloud Peak's Wu-Wei sword saint, Feng Qingyan. Just as the crowd was asking each other about Yu Haoran's background, a voice suddenly sounded from the mountain peak, introducing Yu Haoran's background. "Ooh, who is it? Who was speaking just now?" The inexplicable introduction immediately attracted the attention of the crowd on the mountain peak. However, after the crowd asked back and forth, no one stood out to admit it. However, what no one noticed was that among the crowd on the west side of the mountain peak, a middle-aged man of about 40 years old, wearing a gray robe, was looking down at the blue stone beneath his feet. However, in the middle-aged man's eyes, there was a strong sense of hatred. "Yu Haoran, not only did you cause the death of my wife and child, you also forced me to give up the position of sect master and become a stray dog. I, Zhao Ji, will never forget this hatred." The middle-aged man's eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at the green stone beneath his feet. His heart was filled with an overwhelming amount of hatred. That's right, the person who had deliberately changed his voice to reveal Yu Haoran's origin was the former gate master Zhao Ji, who had escaped from the 100 Chi Gate. After successfully escaping from the 100 Chi Gate by deceiving his uncle, Zhao Ji headed straight for the branch of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion in Xianyang City. Originally, he thought that with his cultivation at the peak of the 9th grade martial royal realm, he should be valued by the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion. They would definitely send experts to help him regain the position of the sect master. However, what he did not expect was that the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion would not only reject his request on the spot, but also pursue the loss of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion after the mission failed. If not for the special relationship he had with Jiang Yin, the vice pavilion master of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, he would not have been able to leave the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion branch in Xianyang City alive. All of this had been brought upon him by Yu Haoran. This caused his hatred for Yu Haoran to reach the point where he would not rest until he was dead. However, following the rise of Yu Haoran's reputation, Zhao Ji sadly realized that his desire for revenge was becoming more and more remote. This was especially true when Yu Haoran had killed 11 quasi-venerable level exotic beasts in the Hengduan Mountains under the witness of the Heavenly Way. Zhao Ji knew that he would not be able to kill his enemy even if he died alone. Therefore, he planned to leave the southern region and head to the central region to see if he could join a first-rate sect. He would then borrow the strength of the first-rate sect to help him destroy Yu Haoran. However, he did not expect to see Yu Haoran during the short period of rest on the Twin Ox Mountain. He even saw him kill the deacon of the Yushu temple, Zhui Yuqing. He knew that his hope had come. If he secretly went to the Yushu temple to inform them, not only would he be able to borrow the strength of the Yushu temple to kill Yu Haoran, he would also have a high chance of joining the Yushu temple. Although his position would not be very high, he would at least be able to gain a foothold in the central region. He might even be able to borrow the strength of the Yushu Temple to regain the position of sect master of the 100 Chi Gate. However, in order to prevent Yu Haoran from denying it, he had to take the risk of exposing Yu Haoran's background. In this way, Yu Haoran would not be able to deny killing the Deacon Zhui Yuqing in front of everyone. When everyone's attention returned to the opening of the sword gauntlet, Zhao Ji quietly left the Twin Ox Mountain and headed straight for the Yushu Temple in the central region. Sitting cross-legged at the west gate of the sword gauntlet, Yu Haoran slowly closed his eyes and separated his consciousness into two parts. One part of his consciousness was used to recall his understanding of the way of the sword in his previous life. The other part of his consciousness was used to look through all the sword arts and martial skills that he had collected during this period of time. With the help of his accumulation of sword arts, he would be able to increase his sword arts cultivation through the sword gauntlet. Time passed by minute. An hour later, as the light on the east gate of the sword gauntlet dimmed, a peak 9th grade martial saint expert walked out from the south gate of the sword gauntlet with an excited expression. As if he did not see the crowd watching him, the peak 9th grade martial saint expert used his maximum speed and quickly returned to the inn that he had rented in the Rydok City. He started to comprehend what he had gained from the sword gauntlet. After another 20 minutes, as the light on the north gate of the sword gauntlet dimmed, another peak 9th grade martial saint expert walked out from the south gate of the sword gauntlet excitedly and quickly returned to the inn that he had rented in the Rydok City. In less than 3 minutes, as the light on the west gate of the sword gauntlet dimmed, a first tribulation quasi-martial saint expert walked out from the south gate of the sword gauntlet with furrowed brows. However, he did not immediately leave the mountain peak. Instead, he found a green rock on the mountain peak and sat cross-legged on the green rock. He started to study what he had been puzzled about. The actions of the first tribulation quasi-martial saint expert caused the faces of the people on the mountain peak to turn ugly, because this meant that the first tribulation quasi-martial saint expert would definitely choose to re-enter the sword gauntlet after figuring out what he was puzzled about. This also meant that there would be one less person to enter the sword gauntlet. Just as the 3 experts who had entered the sword gauntlet left, the east gate, west gate of the sword gauntlet that was originally closed quickly opened. Without any hesitation, Yu Haoran immediately stood up and walked into the sword gauntlet. As a strange energy swept through his body, a sword slowly condensed in the air of the first level of the sword gauntlet. It was an ordinary iron sword. Waving his hand at the iron sword in the air, the iron sword instantly flew into his hand. After holding the iron sword in his hand and drawing a sword flower, Yu Haoran looked straight at the figure that was slowly condensing in front of him. A martial artist who was purely condensed from energy, a swordsman who was only a first-grade martial disciple. Taking a deep breath, Yu Haoran controlled his strength to that of a first-grade martial disciple and took the initiative to attack. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.